Are you searching for the best in online black radio? Then go to blacktalkradionetwork.com, helping you filter through the noise. Real talk, black talk.
The internet is full of half-truths and all-out lies. We've all seen them, and many people on social media complaining about it. Here's your chance to show and prove. WorldAfropedia.com is a black-owned and operated encyclopedia. There are several thousand articles, but we need help. We can't uncover all the truth ourselves. So please, join us and become a writer, editor, or blogger for WorldAfropedia.com today. Every little bit counts. We owe it to the future generations to put the truth out there. Visit WorldAfropedia.com, the African-centered encyclopedia, a global database of African knowledge for the purpose of bringing about global African wisdom and understanding. WorldAfropedia.com.
I currently work at a medical warehouse where we ship medical supplies and things like that. And I've been working here as a temp agent for like a year, almost a year and a half. And every time that I try to contact the temp agency about, trying to get hired on permanently so I can, make a little more money or, have some health benefits or just to take a vacation, like I haven't taken a vacation or had any personal time in like a year and a half. So, it's kind of wearing on me. I tend to not get a response. I try to file inquiries with the temp agency to find out, what's the situation at the job and if they're even, accepting full-time employees. But from what I was told by a permanent worker that is my active supervisor, that there's more temp workers that work at the warehouse than it is actual, permanent employees. And I noticed, most of the temp workers are, people that, non-white, and most of the permanent employees are, people that consider themselves white. I've did some research to figure like is there something like I can do? Can I file like a audit on the company to see their hiring practices or what's one thing? Like do they have the what's the law where they have to hire a certain amount of non-white? I forgot the name of the policy. I think it's called affirmative action laws. Like, do they receive any affirmative action funds or anything like that? I'm kind of ran into a roadblock when it comes to that type of information. I was just wondering if anybody can give me any type of advice or suggestions on to try to, finally get hired on permanent with this current assignment that I'm on. I'll mute my line.
My suggestion, sir, for that, thank you for dialing in. That exactly what you described, like that is the exact design of white supremacy in terms of, I mean, with that, the temp agency, like they have done reports, like even recently, very detailed reports where that is super widespread. In fact, Thomas in New York, he talked about his experience when he was working at a temp agency where they had the system down so precise. I think the law was something like, and he's here, I think he can correct me, but I think something was like the law was you could only be a temporary employee at this agency for, let's say, 99 days. They would have you on until the 98th day, fire you, and then break you back and start your 98-day cycle all over again. I don't know if it was 98 days in Thomas's thing or what the exact number there, but I mean that's the scenario. Like that's how precise, that's how refined the system of white supremacy is with regards to the temp agency. That's what it's going to be. I'm sure you could file and amass evidence, but I mean, that is wide spread across the world, certainly this part of the world. Thomas in New York, just if you can verify, isn't that so? What I said about the number of days, like they had it that codified. You don't have to talk for a whole lot. I don't know if you're in a place where you can speak, but isn't that right?
Yeah, and I did have a story myself. I was waiting, but yeah, and it was 89 days, and on the 89th day, they had it set up so you just collect 2 weeks of unemployment, and then they'll bring you back. And that process lasted me, I probably did that job for over a year.
Now, it's the job of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the EEOC, to enforce federal anti-discrimination laws. Our investigation found that the commission has received complaints about automation personnel services, but no one could give us details. That's because everything the commission investigates is kept secret, unless it files a lawsuit. So far, that hasn't happened with automation. Still, we did speak with the chair of the EEOC, Jenny Yang, and she confirmed a lot of what we found out about the temp industry.
We do see significant job discrimination continuing. And one of the concerns we have about the growing temporary workforce is that those workers are now some of our most vulnerable workers because they can't be assured they have a job the next day. And we had a case, for example, where this temporary agency had classified their workers and they would comply with discriminatory requests by the employer. And when 2 employees opposed that discrimination, they were fired. And so this employer would use photos of the temporary workers to determine their race and gender. And then they had code words. So, for example, they would say hockey player, vanilla cupcake, or someone like you and me. Or they would, use a W or a smiley face to signal that they preferred a white worker.
Why do you think this problem still persists? I mean, at this point, you think it would die off.
Well, I think for us, addressing the problems in the temporary workforce are even harder than in other employers because the information is harder to identify. Workers at one employer may actually be placed by many different staffing agencies. So if you are investigating the source of the problem, there are many different pieces to the puzzle, many different responsible parties, and it is much harder to try to establish what is going on in a particular employer.
You've got a case backlog of some 75,000 complaints. Do you have the resources necessary to deal with that type of backlog?
Well, unfortunately, the demand for our services have always exceeded our available resources. We currently have what we call our workload of 76,000 charges, and we have about 550 investigators who are fully trained to handle this caseload. And on average now, a filer waits less than 10 months to get a resolution of a charge.
What is it about the temp industry that basically this type of discrimination is able to flourish?
I think there are a number of issues because many employers are now relying on a staffing agency to send them their workers. They sometimes mistakenly believe they are not responsible for either the working conditions of those workers or for the types of hiring that's done. So they think they can perhaps insulate themselves from responsibility for discriminatory criteria when in fact they can't.
Have we failed in tackling this problem? And if so, what are the tools that we can use to change that?
There remain many biases, right? That people have stereotype notions about who's going to be successful in a particular type of job. And unfortunately, what we've seen is that often people rely on those notions rather than giving people a chance based on their experience. And we've seen that in the staffing agency where in particular, staffing agencies are refusing to place African American employees based on their race, and they are terminating employees when they complain about that, as well as limited assignments that individuals may have. So that is something that we see recurring, and we want to be able to provide opportunities for all workers, and we think this is a very important area for companies to be looking at.
That was Jenny Yang, chair of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission.
Starbucks is preparing for an ambitious project in a couple of weeks. It'll train employees throughout the company on ways to eliminate discrimination and bias, even unconscious bias. This is part of the company's response to the inappropriate arrest of 2 black men at a Philadelphia Starbucks last month. Behavioral scientists have an evolving view of what's effective in addressing unconscious bias. NPR's Yuki Noguchi reports on some of the challenges.
David Rock founded the Neuro Leadership Institute on the idea that leaders can learn a few things from brain science, like, for example, how to better motivate workers and get them to learn more, or how to reduce the effects of bias.
Mitigating bias is one of the hardest things in human existence.
Eliminating it would require people to become completely self-aware and objective about their own thoughts. Rock says no one's found a way to do that.
Any strategy that essentially relies on people to try not to be biased is doomed to fail. That's the heart of the problem.
But Rock says people are adept at identifying the biases of their peers. In his work as a consultant, he recommends workplaces develop what he calls if-then protocols, involving decision-making by teams. If a person asks for a raise, then take it to a committee. If a man walks into a store and buys nothing, then consult colleagues about an appropriate response.
You've got to shift the focus from individuals trying not to be biased to teams being able to catch bias. There's decades of research showing that format of strategy actually is the best format for behavior change and habit formation.
In other words, create structures that don't rely on the individual to change. Heather McGee agrees.
Starbucks has very aspirational goals for the values it wants to set, both within its company and in the world.
McGee is president of the social advocacy group Demos. She, along with former Attorney General Eric Holder and the NAACP, is advising Starbucks on its training and policies. She says training is just one of many steps in what she calls an ongoing public education, one she says no other company has tried to tackle at such large scale.
So few companies, if any, have taken the kind of responsibility that Starbucks has to have said, A, this was about race, B, this wasn't just one bad apple, and C, we have the right and responsibility to do something about it.
McGee says her main goal for the training day is to create a shared language and understanding about why inclusion and diversity are critical for a company as public as Starbucks. She says she's glad to see the company facing it.
If addressing bias is not mission critical for your company, then you shouldn't do it at all, because it's just too difficult to do if it's not something that is essential to making your company succeed.
Howard Ross, an expert and consultant on bias training, says there are companies that have done this successfully. Denny's, the restaurant chain, faced a similar crisis in the 1990s, ultimately paying more than $54 million to settle a class action suit brought by black customers.
They didn't try to shun the responsibility for it. They started looking at their organization from top to bottom and put in place a number of different things that seemed to move the organization in a very different direction.
Within a decade, Denny's earned a reputation as one of the most minority-friendly workplaces. Ross says in addition to systemic change, workers need constant reminders about the company's priorities and an ongoing method of assessing its reputation among customers and employees. Starbucks advisor Heather McGee agrees this is a work in progress, one she hopes will eventually spread to other companies.
I know that other CEOs have reached out to the leadership of Starbucks and said, we assume and we know that we have a problem with this too. So thanks for going first, and we'll be watching.
Starbucks will close on the afternoon of May 29th for the training. Yuki Noguchi, NPR News, Washington.
Context of White Supremacy. Gus T Renegade in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information on the system of white supremacy. Today's date, Thursday, May 17th, 2018. So I have been told. Not related to anything that you just heard or anything that we're going to discuss this evening. I don't think. Do you all remember, like, circa 2012, 2013, when a significant chunk of black people, non-white people, thought that two of the individuals in this part of the world, Northwestern Hemisphere, that were causing the most problems were former President Barack Obama and former MSNBC host Melissa Harris Perry. I'm not saying that every single non-white person, every single black person, but I do remember circa 2012, 2013, there were a sizable chunk of folks, some of them C.O.W.S listeners, who thought that two of the people who were causing the most problems for black people in what they call the United States of America were President Barack Obama, Melissa Harris Perry. I crack up laughing every time I think about that now, and it reminds me why Mr. Fuller has on the front page of his book, if you don't understand racism, white supremacy, what it is, how it works, everything else that you think you understand will only confuse you. Woo! And that seems like ancient history now. Anyway, this here is Workplace Racism, Neutralizing Workplace Racism. The goal, hopefully offer strategies, counter-racist logic to help solve problems without creating new problems, specifically focused on the area of labor. As I say consistently at the beginning of each one of these broadcasts, this is not a spectator program. This is certainly not one, this segment, for people to just sit back and put their feet up. I guess it's no playoff basketball today for folks to enjoy, and it's no scandal either. So, I mean, you might be hurting if you are looking for amusements. This is not one. I'm sure you can figure out other things to do. For this broadcast, we should have a lot of folks, non-white people, victims of white supremacy. If you have any sort of work experience at all, I am sure you can contribute to workplace racism. First and foremost, if we have any black people, if you have figured out what to do so that you have a great office with a spectacular view, you get every single bonus on time, no gripes, no complaints. Your paycheck is always accurate to the penny. If you ever have an emergency, if you need sick time, personal leave, vacation time, whatever it is, it's done. Stroke of a pen, click of a key, swipe of a pad, whatever, no problem. You are in a cushy spot and look like you could coast to retirement. If you are in that glorious position, you should be the first person to dial in and give us data on how you did it so we can replicate your remarkable success. And you should invest in the C.O.W.S. racism-notes.blogspot.com. PayPal button is in the top right corner. But anyone in that position, you should be like the very first person to dial in with suggestions, counter-racist suggestions. Certainly anybody, if you are having problems and you would appreciate getting some counter-racist thoughts, perspectives on your situation and possible ways that you can handle things, feel free. Chime in. The number 641-715-3640. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Number again, 641-715-3640. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Certainly for any folks, if you're not able to dial in during the program, if you want to either share a situation that you're dealing with on the job, or if you have suggestions or even feedback on what's being discussed, if you're not able to dial in, you can email untiljustice@gmail.com, and I can read your commentary on the broadcast. Untiljustice@gmail.com. we can reach you live on the air. The Starbucks situation, I thought was laughable through and through. I continue to think that even though, as I've stated all along, they have some very impressive names attached to their program that's supposed to be about quote unquote racial bias or unconscious bias. Anything that is talking about racism, white supremacy, where the word racism, we talked about that before, we move away from the term racism being even used, much less just saying that the problem that we're talking about is individuals classified as white being dedicated to the practice of white supremacy racism. If that's really what's happening, then this unconscious bias is just, wasting an hour of our time when we could be getting our lattes or, I guess loitering in the Starbucks and waiting to use their restroom. Anyway, I thought that was nonsense, but that is my neck of the woods. The folks who came up with that Starbucks headquarters is right here in Seattle. Other things that I wanted to make sure I share before we get to folks who called in. Chantel has called in many times over the years, victim of white supremacy. I've spoken with her a few times where we're not on the air, and like pretty much everybody else, the conversation within 5 minutes, workplace racism. And she has called in to workplace racism repeatedly to talk about different situations. And she talked about a situation that I thought was important because this apparently happens a lot. And this is something that I had not thought about until I got into counter racism. I hadn't really heard other people talk about this and just the danger that this presents on the job. Mr. Edward Williams has talked about this. He wrote about it actually in his book. Mr. Williams, the founder of counter-racism.com. He's been a guest on this program many times and graciously participated in this our segment on workplace racism as well. But the situation that Chantel talked about, she was saying she was at work and her supervisor was talking to a racist suspect and asking him about his performance on the job and saying, you need to do better at a specific task, whatever it is. This is, in front of a group. This was not a private conversation. And so the racist suspect, certainly I'm not, about to be chastised and called out. And I think this might have even been a non-white person doing this. Like, I'm a white man. You don't just talk to me any old kind of way. I don't have my opioids here to boost my self-esteem. So he says, I think I'm doing a great job. Thank you kindly. And so the non-white supervisor's like, what? Really? You think you're doing a great job? So she turns to Chantel and she says, Chantel, what do you think about his performance? That right there, oh man, I don't care. It just happened to be that in this case, it was a non-white person who was doing this, non-white, non-black person, I think, for, specifics. But that is a standard move that is used in the workplace frequently by race soldiers. In that situation, my view, it is not in your interest to come out and, oh yeah, I think Doug here is the worst employee that we've ever had in the history of this company, and I've been keeping notes. He was late. I do not think that is going to work out well for you to talk bad about this other person, white person, non-white person, none of the above. I class anything like this. I think we had a caller, maybe it was this month, within the last 14 days or so. We had a black female who called in who said that on her job, they fired someone, and maybe even more than one person. And then after they had already terminated these folks without asking her anything, they said, we need to get a formal statement. We're going to have it notarized. We need to get a formal statement regarding all of your knowledge about these employees' termination. Do what? Like what? You didn't ask any of my input to hire these folks. You didn't ask any of my input to fire these people. And now it's gotten all formal like this. Same thing with the situation that Chantel presented. You didn't ask me any information about hiring this guy or anybody else at this company. And now publicly, I'm supposed to give an evaluation of his workplace performance. Are you serious? Like, come on. I would already be thinking, in case any type of situation like that comes up, I'm going to have as little to say as possible. I think I said with the termination situation, all I would have to say, and it would be true, I know that they were terminated. I know that they are no longer employed here, as I was told as of such and such date, and that would be it. Put my Gus T signature on that, and thank you kindly. That is the extent of my knowledge. With that situation, I have no idea about Douglas's performance. I would need a lot of information to make that sort of assessment, and I don't have it. And I would probably try and shorten that statement, but that would be about the essence of it. Like, are you kidding me? Like, I'm supposed to, even if it's a white person that I despise, doing that sort of thing publicly, like I'm going to pile in on like that. Oh my goodness, the animosity. And then I could see where they turn that back around and like, oh yeah, I don't know if you're a team player. Like, remember that time you were talking really bad about Douglas's opponent? You said, well, wait a minute, you asked me. Well, yeah, I just didn't expect that you were going to be so critical of one of our coworkers. You know, he felt really bad. Like I could totally see them doing that sort of thing. I could not imagine a world where responding like, oh yeah, that person is terrible. Like they're just the worst employee, where that's going to work out well for you as a black person, especially if they do that publicly. Like that's so tacky. And I think if I remember correctly, I think Chantel said that the white person said, that is really unprofessional. I think I'm going to make note of that. And it is. I agree with him. I was saying that the whole time. I agree with him. That is super unprofessional to provoke. I mean, that's just asking to promote conflict and strife in the workplace. Be very mindful of that. It seems like that is a pattern. Continuing, there was a report that was in the New York Times. It is related right on topic to workplace racism, although, of course, they don't use the correct language. I want to talk about this because I do know particularly pregnant mothers. We have non-white moms who listen to the program, or if you previously were pregnant, mom now, that's what it's talking about. I think I will pause, wait a little bit for later in the program. The number again, 641-715-3640. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Again, untiljustice@gmail.com if you do not want, or if you're not able to call in, untiljustice@gmail.com if you want to drop an email, and you can ask your question or submit your commentary that way. I'll hit some of the people who dialed in via the phone line, and then I'll remember to share the article about what they call bias against mothers in the workplace. Folks who dialed in with a hand up, line should be open. Any thoughts on how you would, any thoughts on how you would respond to that if you are at work and publicly, in front of the person and other colleagues, publicly asked to critique a colleague's work performance? White or non-white, how would you respond to that sort of prompt in the workplace? If we have suggestions on that, or if folks want to share their own commentary, feel free. Line should be open. 1,000 apologies to Red. My goodness, I was so crude this week with Red in Nevada. My apologies. Other folks who dialed in, if you have a hand up and commentary to share, line should be open. Proceed.
May I be heard?
Yes, ma'am.
Hello, thank you for taking my call. Hello, everyone. Definitely no need to apologize. I actually just work really early, but the things that I wanted to share this week, I guess they're a little bit,
make it neat.
I don't want to say burnt. I don't want to say funny, but I guess definitely it reminded me of how, like, some white people, I guess they try to seem as if they're not, I feel like my manager would probably classify herself as maybe like a liberal, and still her way of racism is really interesting to me. But it reminded me of how Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. had made a comment before, how he was saying that if a black person is in a nice car, then white people will just say, look at the monkey in the car, basically. But so what happened was I had wore my grandma's ring that she gave me. My grandma's still alive, but I'll wear her ring every now and again because I know she likes it when I do that. And I told my manager, I wore it. I wasn't really flashing it or anything like that, but I just so happened to wear it. And manager saw it on my hand, and I told her what type of ring it was, and she really examined my hand for a couple of minutes. She was like, "Oh wow," and it's real too, and it kind of made me laugh because I'm like, I told you what the ring was, but you, with your extensive knowledge of jewelry, and I'm being facetious, still had to examine it yourself. But whatever, that made me think about the whole, it's a monkey wearing a piece of jewelry. So the other thing was that mainly this week is mainly just about the manager and the one racist woman who can't get my name right. I heard her talking to another suspected racist, still not getting my name right, but oh well, I'm glad I don't have to, I really don't deal with her. She really does not, barely even looks at me, which is just how I like it. So we were at a team meeting, and they were talking about, the whole team and her were basically talking about, basically like potlucks and stuff like that, and how she was kind of apologizing for not having some type of refreshments for us. And she was like, well, I know we have picky eaters on the team. And, and then she pointed me out specifically. She was like, yeah, I remember when I was a child, I used to be a picky eater too. And really, I thought that was funny because this is somebody, she's doing she changed up her eating habits temporarily to lose weight. And I feel like she's basically on the cusp of maybe being morbidly obese per the BMI standards. So, just because I don't want to eat all the different meats and sugars and dairy, because they'll buy pizza and you'll just see them just stuffing their face with all this garbage. But the other thing that I did want to share was my mom. She had told me about a story at her job where basically she had to go to white people about something a non-black person had did. And so what happened, and I actually, unfortunately, have met this person because my mother, she likes to uncodified, but she will go out to dinner, go out to different activities with her coworkers, and sometimes she'll invite me. And I made it explicitly clear the last time that I will never go again. But the first time that she invited me out, it was this non-white, non-black person. We were at this, it was a recreational thing. It wasn't like gambling or anything like that. But the non-white, non-black person, they kept making little anti-black comments. It was like with a sport, let's say if we were all playing tennis, he had said something about, well, just imagine if you have to go down and get the ball, just imagine you're picking cotton. I remember it was something like that, but I cannot quite quite remember exactly what he said. My mother, and then I basically stopped listening to him and basically would not really talk to him. But for the rest of the evening, and tried to get out as soon as possible, try to get done with that. But my mother had said that she had spoken with him several times before about not, making comments like that. And when he would make these anti-black comments, then he would come back at her and say, well, you could say this about me because basically that's supposed to be a cultural stereotype against him. But my mother wouldn't do it. And so apparently he had been doing this for a while, and he would actually do that at the job because my mother had been out with this person before. So he would do it at the job, and what he did was that not that long ago, the reason why she finally had to break down and send a message to the white people okay, well, I've said something to him enough times, is that she, like I said before, she had finally, she's been promoted for a while, and she was trying to make sure that she could meet with some of her employees, some of the people who she manages, and she was asking someone if they were going to be leaving, and the non-white, non-black person had came up, and he was like, oh, yeah, well, they're not going to be leaving early. He had said, the land of Wakanda is safe. And this was like right after the movie came out. And so I guess that was basically like the final straw for her. And so I just felt like, this is something that, of course, still blaming it on the suspected racists, but just how we are all, infused with this anti-blackness, and how this is what they want. They want us to feud with each other and then go to them to have to resolve the issues. And I'll mute my line there. Thank you for allowing me to share.
The land of Wakanda is safe. Still haven't seen the movie. Anywho, that kind of weaponizing of, I smile, Mr. Steele, I smile every time, but that weaponizing of food, and specifically when black people, victims of white supremacy, are trying to just eat healthy. I don't want to eat nonsense so that I be, 1,000 pounds overweight and then still a victim of white supremacy. Like, that's not constructive. That's not helping to solve problems. I've seen that consistent. I think other listeners have talked about they would have parties or something that would require or necessitate food in the workplace for like a birthday or something, and it was this person's, the food event was supposed to be for this person, non-white person, and they were like, hey, let's, instead of cupcakes or all the nonsense that we normally get, how about let's just do a fruit bowl, that'll be a little healthier for everyone. And they were like, oh, okay. And so then the day came, and I think they ended up doing both. They got cupcakes and fruit, and they gave some sort of corny reasoning that the other people wouldn't be happy if it was just for anyway. But it was the same type of thing, like, oh, you'd be making us miss out if we just had fruit, and they look forward to having cake. Like, I've seen that happen and heard other people say that they've experienced that same type of kind of backhanded compliment, I think is what they call it, where it still seems like that there's somehow being something derogatory being said about you because you don't want to eat the same type of food that they're eating. And even the comparison, I'm not a child. I'm a victim of white supremacy attempting to be universal woman. But it's like you're like me when I was a little kid and I was just a picky. I mean, what kind of nonsense is that? Just because I don't want to be, super tubby like you. Like, come on. And black self-respect. I always think that should be commended when we have, regardless of who it is, if it's a non-white person, a white person, if they're promoting anti-blackness, that is not acceptable. And I'm not going to pretend that you're not engaging in that behavior, and the incorrectness of that behavior, always commendable to exert black self-respect. Other folks that we have not heard from, if you have your own situation that you want to share, commentary on what's been discussed, or if we have suggestions on how to respond if you are prompted, asked to critique one of your coworkers, line should be open.
May I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Greetings to callers and listeners, and thank you as well, Gus, for having the program. I would just address the first thing about public judgment of coworkers. I've had that happen where there were more coworkers around. It wasn't all out in the open, but it was an office where there were at least 4 other coworkers, and judgment began over how somebody else's performance was. And I completely stepped away from the situation. And when I say that, I mean I addressed it by just saying, if you feel that this person isn't performing properly, then speak to him and tell him that yourself. But I'm not going to judge his performance, because the same way people could judge his performance negatively or judge him negatively behind his back, the same could be done about me or any one of us in here. And that kind of it didn't go too well. Nobody really had that kind of integrity. But again, this was a room full of mainly white males. And going on to my own personal scenario, I basically have a situation where I have a new manager. It's a non-white male. he would classify himself as quote unquote Dominican, but he can actually pass for a white male. In my first introductions with him, things that he was speaking about quote unquote Haiti and his experiences there with black people non-white people was very negative, and I took that into consideration, and it has come to fruition. He's considerably divided the group, our team that has already been divided of 10, with white workers that he cohorts with and hangs out with, speaks with, and then he basically categorizes us as almost like gophers. So even if our numbers match up and are just as good as our teammates, it's almost like he has a perspective that we're not doing work, that we're not as productive as the white males that are in the office. Upon this, noticing this and seeing this, I've done two things. I've documented as much as I can via email work-related subjects as far as compliments, special requests for my presence when it comes to certain projects. I've also set up a bi-weekly meeting with him for at least 15 minutes to go over work that I've done and how to make sure the work can be more efficient. And the third thing is I also bring my metrics, quote unquote, my numbers, to show that my numbers are reflective and just as high as my counterparts that are quote unquote classified white. Those are the actions that I've seen so far, but I bring it to the listeners and yourself as well. Any other actions that I may take that would be productive. And if I may, I have something that's a little bit more personal. I have a cousin that has married a white male that's a cop. And I just don't know. I've just had, bad experiences with police officers, and I don't even want him around me. I literally try to avoid him every opportunity I get, but I'm trying to figure out different ways to be codified without being too aggressive, too stark in the face of, I don't like you, I don't want you in my family kind of attitude. So if anybody could have any input on that one as well, that would be great, because this is the first time I've never experienced this, to be quite frank. I'll mute my line. Thank you for listening.
Indeed. Well, let's make sure we get priorities. This here is workplace racism, and everyone's favorite topic, Area 8, that is not what this broadcast is focused on. And I found that people get very excited about that, so we will have to reserve, I think I'll compromise. We can reserve the final 2 minutes of the broadcast if people have any suggestions for the latter situation that was presented about the unfortunate tragic arrangement. If people have any suggestions for that last 2 minutes of the broadcast, but this is focused on neutralizing workplace racism. The first portion of your commentary about documenting, that's something that we stress on this broadcast for a long time, years. We've talked about the importance of documenting, as have many other non-white people on the job, especially when there are any sort of allegations about you not working or not working as much as other individuals on the job. That's very common where black people get that sort of accusation on the job. I think that's spectacular when you do the emails that you were talking about, any form of, because that's another form of documentation. It's time stamped, date stamped. Multiple parties are now, the communication is there showing, documenting, hey, this such and such and such and such happened today, completed this, got this done. What's the workload going to be for tomorrow? Like, all of that's documented, irrefutable proof, evidence. Bam, you can just go print that out and you're good. When you say you present your metrics, are you printing out data that the company provides, or do you have your own system that you're using to present your metrics in terms of what you've done on the job?
That's correct. This is company information. We have a remote coordinator. She coordinates all the tickets that come through. And she was actually, she's a non-white female, and she basically reached out to me, letting me know that our new manager is monitoring all the non-white males.
Wow.
On the team. And I kudos to her, like, really, I don't even know how to thank her for giving us that information, giving me that information, and allowing me to act appropriately so I could actually be ahead of the curve in regards to what he's been planning, whatever it may be.
Well, seems like there's widespread black self-respect, in some cases, being practiced on the job. I certainly have heard, a sizable amount of, we've got that no good coon and this, that, and the other. But at least on this broadcast over the last year or so, I've heard a lot of black self-respect from callers in trying to help out other black coworkers in situations where they can, and even other black people helping them out, as was the case here. I mean, that is spectacular. I mean, to just, and I think Emmy and others have talked about just at least being able to let a black person know you are under surveillance. Like, do not be fooled. If you thought you were being watched, you are correct and some. Take it seriously. They are looking at you extra hard. Like, just that alone can be a huge boost. So absolutely. Black self-respect, commendation to the female victim who kind of gave you a heads up. And looks like you have heeded her warning well, documenting, doing your diligence on the job. Outstanding. If we have other folks, if you have suggestions on anything that's been shared thus far, or if you have your own situation that you want to discuss, number again, 641-715-3640. The code 564-943#. Press star 61 if you would like to participate.
Can I be heard?
Greetings. Is this our tech engineer?
Yes, this is a software developer in Wisconsin. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, all right. Good evening to everybody. Good evening, Gus. I just had a few observations this week from work. Let's see, Tuesday, I went downstairs to ask the lead architect a question regarding an issue I was working on. And he was looking at the sports betting material online. Of course, we all know you posted on your Facebook that they're getting ready to legalize sports betting everywhere. And I said, oh, are you getting ready to place a bet? And he said, no, never. So his little minion came over and heard us. He said something to the effect of telling his wife that he could use sports betting for supplementary income. I said I wouldn't spend $1 on a lottery ticket. The white male who came over then said, not even if all your coworkers were doing it. And I said, if my coworkers were jumping off a cliff, should I do that too? He said, yeah, if all your coworkers are doing it. I said, I would be at the top of the cliff watching you. And the lead architect starts laughing. Now, I think that was a test. I think I failed that test. It was a test of loyalty, which I probably failed, but whatever. Well, after that, the lead architect starts showing up to meetings that he doesn't normally show up to, that I'm in, and watching me, including yesterday when we were in a 3-hour meeting, and he not only watched me, but he came over to the computer that I was using to see what I had on the computer while I was standing up and talking to somebody else. This was a large meeting room, and there was something being projected on the screen. I stepped away from my computer. He goes over to, well, not my computer, but the computer I was using. He goes over to that computer to see what's on the screen. But clearly under surveillance. We also, just for some background, we also have, I work at a travel software company, so it's sort of like a, I don't know, I guess, intermediary between like an Expedia and hoteliers, airline carriers and things like that. So so every 3 months or so, our CEO gives this thing called a travel talk. And there were at least 4 incidents of racism during this travel talk. The first one was, for some reason, we had to discuss the danger of traveling in Mexico, with all those no good Mexican niggers coming out to kill you and steal all your wares and everything. He also mentioned an agreement between the U.S. Department of Commerce and Middle East airline carriers, where the Middle East airline carriers now have to disclose all their financial information to the government, the U.S. government, and they have to limit flights to and from America. So I thought that was interesting. We have a team in Dallas, and they decided to call themselves 2 Live Crew, which earned a side eye from actually one of the most confused black people in the building. That was pretty funny. And then they talked about giving the poor black kids from the Milwaukee Public School District the opportunity to see quote-unquote technology. One of the biggest, most overt racists was involved in this one. The final observation I have is today I have a bad habit. I smoke every once in a while, and so I was going outside to smoke, and we have these contractors from India who are there for like a month or so. And one of them, a non-white, a female, she comes outside after me, and she's like, hello, and she introduces herself, and I say hello. And she told me that she went out to smoke a cigarette. We're not allowed to smoke on the property of the company. So there's like adjacent parking lot to our company's property where everybody goes to smoke. It's by a dumpster, and everybody just goes over there. And she said she went over there, and apparently the owner of the building that the parking lot belongs to came out of the building and yelled at her to get off his property. And we just yelled very obscene things at her. She said she was very scared to do that. So I'm very scared to go over there and smoke. So I thought that was an important act of racism, too, especially since everybody from our company goes over there to smoke. There's numerous people over there smoking during the day, and it's not anything out of the ordinary. So he obviously picked her out. And as far as as far as being asked to critique people in public, I've normally just said things like, I think he's doing a great job. He could be doing the worst job in the world. Just say he's doing a great job and keep it moving, and that's it. That's it. Or, hey, it's really not my job to give a judgment. So that's all I have. I will mute my line. Thank you for letting me speak.
Yes, ma'am. Caller in Wisconsin. That absolutely, I like that one too. Like that is substantially above my pay grade to evaluate employees. Man, we need to talk about like a major salary bump for that. Anyway, that 2 Live Crew, it doesn't get any better than tacky. At least those moments where you said a non-white person who seems very confused about white supremacy at that moment even seemed to catch something incorrect about whites doing this sort of thing, particularly in a work environment. And I think anytime where there are like skits or opportunities for people to be quote unquote creative and relax, have some fun, yeah, the racism, white supremacy is very likely to come out in those types of skits. I think they were doing some sort of skit in a workplace setting, and it ended up being something really, really tacky. I think the non-white person was like a thrown away adopted child in the scenario that they were pointing out. But look for the white supremacy racism. You probably were being tested, some sort of racist shenanigan with the jump off the cliff, and everybody else here is doing it. If everybody else here is going to buy lottery tickets or go gamble their money on, whatever the latest craze is, you're supposed to do it. And particularly, I suspect that probably stood out to see a black person saying, really? This Negro is not going to go along with us and do everything that like, really? We have a Negro that is willing to, wow, That is amazing. We have got to watch her. Even that's exactly like absolutely. Go look at her screen and see what she's go see what she's doing. We're going to investigate more closely to see why our brain trashing has not been more effective with this one. Like, yes, we will have to study further. That is the system of racism, white supremacy. Appreciate that again, caller in Wisconsin. Other folks, if you have commentary on what we've discussed thus far. Yes, greetings, Thomas in New York.
Greetings, Gus. I've had a tough week so far. First thing I wanted to say in regards to the last caller, this is why you need to build a wall to keep the Mexicans out, because they're very dangerous. They're going to rape our women. I mean, let's not forget that's how Trump got elected, making those comments. So it doesn't surprise me that it's a very anti-Mexican sentiment, especially in areas where there's a lot of Mexicans. This Russian guy at work a few weeks ago, a Russian white man, but he's a Jewish person. You know how they work their word game, but he's a white man. Either way, he comes over to me and he complains about the smell in the bathroom. Like, this is my job. So it's in the bathroom, there's 2 toilets and a urinal. Of course, the toilets have you can't see the next person using the bathroom. They have the walls up like any other bathroom, and 1 urinal. So it's a very small bathroom, and a firm with, at least 100 people, and way more than half are men. I mean, probably 70 to 80% are men. So, it does reek when you walk in there sometimes. So he bought his own air freshener because he wanted me to order a specific air freshener. And I told him, that's not my job. You got to go speak to the receptionist. That's her job to order those type of supplies. So instead of him going to speak to her, he came back the next day with this very fancy air freshener, and he wanted me to put it on the wall in the bathroom. So I'm thinking, this isn't my job, But at the same time, I'm thinking, man, I hate the smell of the bathroom. So I'm glad he bought this thing. So, it didn't have to go on the wall. I'm very tall, so I'm able to just put it up high where it's pretty unobservable. And so now he's trying to make this my job to buy the replacements for this thing. And it's like I told him, I kept telling him, you gotta go speak to the receptionist. I don't order things, that's not my job. I go get food. But that's about all the money they give me. I go to the bank for them just to deposit checks, and get petty cash. But as soon as I come back, they got to count that. I mean, it's not my job, So this guy, he harasses me every day about, are you going to change, the thing? Should I go buy my own? And I say, listen, man, I'll take the stepping stool, and when it runs out, you could go change it yourself. It's not, something I'm going to be monitoring, you know what I'm saying? And it's just becoming a pain. Now, this white lady today, she pissed me off to the umpteenth power, okay? Because the firm that I work for has a file room. Of course, it's an accounting firm, and they have to keep records of, all the accounts they deal with. However, they go on paperless, so all these files have to be discarded. Paperwork inside the files has to be handled appropriately. Some of it will be sent back to the client. Some of it has to be shredded or burnt. So this is the project I've been working on, which is taking up most of my day, because there's thousands and thousands of files in the file room, and I'm doing each individual person's accounts, one at a time. And, like I said, there's a lot of people who handle these accounts. So some people might only have 20 files. Some people might have 500 files, depending on how many clients they have. So either way, this job has been, this task has been very stressful because it's not in order. The people who did it before me didn't really stick to the numbering system the way they should. So this is like really trying to find a needle in a haystack sometimes to look for these files. And either way, I'm working with the partners, and I don't like working directly with white people, in particular white men. But So every time I'm cutting the fruit, and somehow the knives, the cutting knives, wind up missing. Now they send out an email wanting to know who took, if someone put it at their desk, who took it to their desk to cut something, please bring it back. Nonetheless, it's been almost 8 or 9 days now, and I'm cutting fruit with a butter knife. Okay, and every time it's a small firm as far as the office space, and it's a small kitchen. And every time I turn around, I'm bumping into someone because they feel as though they could come and make a quick coffee. I mean, it's not enough space for 3 people. So I'm working around people who's reaching over me while I'm cutting stuff, and it's becoming quite frustrating. So I've decided that I'm no longer going to, when someone comes in, I'll walk out. Which she walks in and I walked out. So she's like, well, what are you doing? So I'm like, well, I need space. I'm working with a knife. I'm not going to cut myself. I would, if she's one of these, she walks in, and sometimes I don't even know she's there. I turn around and bump into her. And it's like, it startles me. And she's, hey, how are you? And she wants to reach in and take stuff with her hands, that I cut, and I specifically keep it in the kitchen now so that people don't do that. But of course, she's special. She can do that because I can't tell her she can't. And she prides herself in doing that every day. Either way, the fruit, spending the $60 on this fruit every day is still an issue. But she's not talking to me about it because, like I said, I'm not changing up what I'm doing. This is how I was trained to do it. This is what the people that are in charge told me to do. And because she has a problem with throwing away a couple of apples or a pear at the end of the day, that's her problem, So either way, I walked back today after doing, the files all morning and then going to the bank for her. Now, mind you, I go to the bank for the firm. I'm the bank person. However, somehow she throws her personal stuff up there all the time. And I have to go to the bank sometimes specifically just for her and her husband who doesn't work there. So this week I started writing down in my timesheet because they want you to be very detailed in what you did so they could bill clients when I'm doing client-related stuff. I started writing down who I'm going to the bank for. So I put bank, how many hours it took for me to do that task. And I went to the bank for X, Y, and Z. So hopefully they catch on to it because, I don't want to go and complain about that specifically. But I'm hoping when the people who check my timesheet and allocate the hours see that I'm going to the bank, and I don't put her name, I put her husband's name there, so that way, because his name's on the account with hers. So I put her husband's name there, so that way they know I'm going for her husband. If he has a different last name than her, maybe she uses her maiden name. But either way, I come back from the bank for her. I had to leave my file task alone, which is, I have to catch up with that. But, she left this check there yesterday that she wanted deposited into her account. And I said, if I don't do it today, it's going to be a problem. So let me run and do it, which cut my lunch break kind of short. But either way, I was going that way for lunch anyway. So I come back and there's a list on my desk, detailed as per, she wants 8 apples, 16 oranges. And then it's even telling me where to go get the fruit from. So she doesn't want all this stuff from the same place where I get it from. She wants me to go to the Amish market, which is 3 avenues and 6 blocks away, to get a watermelon every day. And she had the guy who did the job before me make this list. Now, he got off the train by the Amish market, and he would just go in the morning and get a watermelon. But the guy that does the stand where I'm at, he doesn't have watermelon all the time. So, sometimes they get it, sometimes they don't. But either way, I guess she wants that. And so now I'm going tomorrow, and I'm going to not complain about it. I'm going to insist that they lower the amount to $40 because it's cutting into the foul project, which is what the boss wants me to be doing. And, and then if they ask questions, then I'm able to offer some. I don't want to just go and complain about it, just flat out. But I'm not walking all the way to the Amish market every day to get this and go over here to get cherries. I'm not doing all that. You know, I have one fruit stand that I go to, and across the street is a supermarket. If I can't make it work from those two places, it is what it is. I spend the $60. I keep the receipts. I keep the proof of it. It is what it is. So I'm gonna tell them to cut it to $40 because it's becoming a problem, and I'm not, you know, I'm not gonna complain about where she wants me to go. I'm just hoping that leads to the conversation where I can complain about that. So yeah, those were my two workplace. You know, well, that was my workplace for this week so far. But when I saw that list today, man, it took me. I mean, I was so angry, Gus. In the old timers probably would have started typing an email or you know, I would have, I mean, but I had to calm myself down and I had to snicker to myself like, man, what else did I expect from this lady? She's been consistent since I've worked here. So I'm just going to have to counter it differently. I did go to the gentleman who's had the job before me, and I complained to him, like, yo, why, you know, he said she comes to me and complains about the fruit you buy every day, that you're buying too much, and then. So I had to make, she told me to make this list so she can approve it and all of this stuff here. And I said, well, listen, I'm not going all these places. I said, I'm going to have to go. And he said, don't go and complain about her. That's the worst thing to do. So that's why I think I'm just going to complain about the money. And hopefully that leads into the conversation where it's not like I went over there to complain about her. And I just want to know if anyone had any other suggestions. I'll mute my line.
Wow. I mean, that is, again, the book, I think it's been mentioned in reference to Thomas in New York's situation in this new position repeatedly, but Edward Baptist, The Half Has Never Been Told, where he just talks about the arbitrary nature of white terrorism and aggression, where it's not necessarily that the non-white person did anything incorrect or, you know, that they weren't working hard. They could have worked just as hard today as they did on Wednesday. That's irrelevant. You just have someone who is a total psychopath and they enjoy harassing, abusing, terrorizing black people. Like that is the essence of white supremacy. That means more than anything else. That's my reason for being. And I mean, to see it expressed in so many different ways where so many, the bathroom freshener. No, I want this one specifically. I'm going to buy it, and then I want you to go you are now responsible for all of the cartridges and keeping that maintained. I was even thinking it wouldn't surprise me if he had slipped some sort of camera in the device, whatever it is, fragrance device or what have you, to spy on people in the bathroom. But anyway, the fruit, just all of it coming to molest you while you're cutting the fruit, and then to complain about the amount of fruit, and we want you to run all over New York to get these different types of enchanted bear. I mean, come on. Edward Baptist, The Half Has Never Been Told. He talks about this exact manifestation of white terrorism. I do think that is a quality strategy to not attach it to a complaint about her nitpicking, but just in terms of, you know, the quantity, that is too much. Maybe if we cut down on the amount, that'll reduce a lot of problems, because you're having people complain about the waste and then nitpicking about everywhere it's coming. Like, maybe if we buy a little less, that'll reduce all of this. And this is not supposed to be my primary task anyway. What it seems like they want me to focus on is the filing, and, you know, this is causing a distraction from that. I think that's a good way to approach it without it being anything personal to the white woman.
Can I add some more, Gus, please?
Yes, sir.
I have more to unpack here. So I'm at the bank for her. This was this week. It might have been Monday, and it was a check that was from Ivoline, right? So, you know, not for the firm, for her. So when I give them the first check, it was a regular check. The second one, they're looking at this check from Ivoland, and they go to the back, and they come back, and they say, listen, it's going to take 8 to 10 weeks for this check to clear. Are you sure you want to cash this? Because there's, you know, you can probably get it cashed at, you know, certain exchange rate places, whatever. So I said, well, hold on, let me call. So I call, and she's not there. So I said, man, You know, I called the receptionist back like, hey, you know, you connected me to her phone, but you know, she's not at her desk. And she says, oh, I just saw her walk that way. Let me connect you back again. She connects me back again. She's not there. So I can come back to the receptionist. I said, you know, can you just let me know when you see her? So she says, oh, she's walking past now. I'm going to connect Thomas to you. So what's wrong? You know, when she gets to her desk, like she has an attitude, because I guess I made her have to, you know, go to her desk and talk. So either way, I'm like, listen, you know, this check is going to take 8 to 10 weeks to clear. And I just wanted to make sure you wanted this cash. Of course I wanted cash. Like, what do you, I mean, I sent it to you and da-da-da-da. It's like real nasty. And I'm like, man, I'm doing you a favor. This ain't even my job. This is the day I decided I'm going to start writing down what I'm doing with the banking. So that way, you know. But either way, so I'm doing this while I'm on my lunch break. But, you know, of course, I'm extending my time on my lunch break because I'm at the bank. So I'm sitting down eating a sandwich. And I get a call. So I see it's the job number. So it just comes up generic, you know, the same receptionist number. So I'm thinking, what, something go wrong at work? Do they need me? So I pick up the phone, and it's her. I got a call from this number. I said, oh, it's this Thomas. I called you about the check. Next time you call me, leave a message, and hung up the phone. I said, just, you know what I'm saying? Listen, I'm calling you about your check, okay? I mean, you talk about pissed off, Gus. I mean, so either way, I'm talking on one day, another day this week. I call, or maybe he called me, Mr. Firefighter, and we're talking about racism, white supremacy, and I'm taking lessons from his great knowledge. And I'm on the job, you know, and I'm walking. They sent me to go get an ice cream cake that they ordered, and it was about 4 blocks away from Baskin Robbins. It, you know, was already, you know, I guess, had the names and everything on it. So I, you know, go get the cake, walk back, I get back upstairs. So I'm carrying the bag through. So the receptionist is sitting there, and the lady I'm talking about, standing next to the receptionist, bothering her, harassing her. She's a black lady, the receptionist. So either way, she's like, I said, okay, I got the ice cream cake. Where do you want me to put this? She goes, shh, it's a surprise party. Why would you come in here? I mean, just start yelling out loud. You making more noise than I did. I didn't know it was a surprise. How did I know that? You didn't tell me that. You told me to go pick up this cake, you know, on my lunch break once again. But I'll mute my line, Gus. Thank you.
Context of White Supremacy. Thomas in New York, I got your back. That right there.
I got your back too.
That is Edward Baptist. The half has never been told. Any excuse to yell at, fuss, humiliate a black person. Shh, talk to you like you're a little child or something, like going to doing. And I thought that was a great counter-racist tactic as well. The terrorist who is sending you on these errands to go to the bank and cash checks for her whole family and what have you, to put down the husband's name. I guess they might say that that's quote unquote dry snitching, but I think that's a great way to go about it, where they can just look at the billing if they're going to be that Nazi about, you know, the hours and how much they have to pay this nigger. Like, well, wait a minute. Why is his name coming up here? Does he have an account with us? What's going on with this? Great tactic right there as well. But I mean, that's standard operating procedure. You're going out to help them with their cakes and banking and whatever else, and any excuse to just call and be nasty and hang up in your face while you. That is racist man, racist woman, what it means to be classified as white. Context of white supremacy. I'm sorry you had to deal with all of that trashiness for the week, Thomas, in New York. If we have other folks that we have not heard from at all, if you have a hand up, line should be open. Proceed.
Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Greetings, everyone. Just had the time to tune in. All before I was at the hospital visiting my mother. I heard something about the nagging white woman, What is is there any question for today?
I think I did ask how, well, suggestions on how to respond if you are prompted to publicly critique or evaluate a coworker, because that's come up. A non-white person presented that as an issue this week. If we had any suggestions on how to respond when asked to publicly critique a coworker at work.
They probably wouldn't make a habit of asking me, because when it came down to a non-white person, I made sure I never had any super terrible relationships with a non-white black person. If there was something that would have came to some kind of consistent arguing and fussing, I just wouldn't linger, through the conversation with a non-white person like that. So I would just avoid that particular point and deal with them constructively as close as I could, or far away if that was the case. So when it came to something like that, if I was asked to do that, it would be something that wouldn't hurt them. But it'd be a different situation if that was if I was doing that with a white person, which I really don't see where that becomes an effective means where a non-white person is actually able to critique a white person. But I wouldn't attempt to try to do anything to harm a non-white person. Unfortunately, in that type of situation, non-white people are used consistently, as Chief Phillips stated when he was a guest on your program. They would use that non-white black person to harm another non-white person. Although I would say about Charlie, he had a level of consciousness to whereas he was able to have that same codification that I explained earlier, because he was often called to the station where myself and Mr. Clark and some of the other crazy militant Negroes, he was called to that station a whole lot for that purpose. Matter of fact, as you recall, when Mr. Clark and two others got into that trouble, that he refused to fire them. He refused to fire Mr. Clark and the other two guys because he stated that they didn't do it. They didn't break any rules. He actually did the thing that unfortunately, a lot of non-white people won't do, and at the sacrifice of some damage coming to them, which it did, to Chief Phillips, and hopefully through all of that mouth running I've been doing, I've answered the question. Thank you.
Indeed. Context of White Supremacy. Chief Phillips' book is Fighting More Than Fires. Centrally the topic we are talking about right here this evening, workplace racism. Former guest on the program, as retired firefighter stated. Even if I can just briefly go back to what Thomas in New York shared, where the white women or multiple, I think he was saying multiple racists would come in the kitchen when he's chopping fruit and grabbing things before he's done with it and reaching over him, and he's bumping into them just being in his space. Reminded me of Delectable Negro. Even the taking of the food items as a form of practicing racism, and then just the control of space and really control of the black body in that space by these whites. Reminded me of Delectable Negro. Other folks have comments. If we have any folks that we've not heard from at all, if you have either your own situation that you wanted to discuss, or if you had commentary, suggestions on what we've heard thus far, feel free. I think Thomas in New York asked for suggestions as well on how to deal with some of his situations with these white women, white people, period, molesting him about a variety of things in the workplace.
Can I be heard?
Greetings, caller in Florida. Sarah, female caller.
May I be heard?
Yes,
Yeah,
ma'am.
Go ahead, ma'am.
I'm not in Florida. Hi, how are you?
Right poorly.
I called this show before. Yeah, I'm right poorly. Doing right poorly too. I called the show before. I work in the clinical research industry. I have tons of workplace racism stories, but I would like to make a comment about what I heard on the show from last week about maintaining a poker face. Last week I had to train a site on a protocol for a cancer study. My strong suit is not my main therapeutic area is not oncology, even though I'm still learning and trying to master that area. And the presentation I had to give was in front of cancer docs, like people who specialize in oncology at a major institution that's known for their cancer research and treatment. And most, well, not most, all of the docs know that, people in the industry who work in the pharmaceutical industry who are known as clinical research associates, we're not physicians. Some of us are, or nurses or whatever, but most of us just, have, a higher degree, and we learn different therapeutic areas, and that becomes, our area of expertise without having gone to anyone's medical school. So I went into this meeting, and generally the training meetings for this particular protocol go for 4 hours. I get there, and they told me I only had 15 minutes to present 278 slides. I had to talk really fast, but in the interim of me going over the overview and everything that needed to be done, there was like a panel of people just firing questions at me and also making comments about the way the protocol was written that were very rude, that I had nothing to do with because I didn't write the protocol. It came from the actual drug companies. This is what they want. This is how you do it. And after, it took longer than 15 minutes. And after they were finished berating me and asking me all these off-the-wall questions, they just asked me to leave. So I was unable to maintain a poker face and not show how disgusted I was. I left feeling very demoralized, very insulted, and it was just bad. I had never experienced anything like that in all the years I've been doing this.
Wow. I'm so sorry that you had to experience that. That running theme, I could just keep saying the book. It is in the archives. We did do that in the book club. The half has never been told. But I mean, that's something, in my view, that whites live for. And particularly, in my view, it's glaring that that's what it is, that this is not one of those situations, well, maybe they were just having a tough day. No, they're practicing white supremacy racism, and they live to exactly what I just said, humiliate black people. Like, you have tons of white people. That makes them feel better in between being able to get their opioid hit. Like, I can go and make these niggers feel, really, like that's what we have in the system of white supremacy. And like I was saying, what makes it particularly glaring when you go in, I think you said you have 270 slides. You would normally have a sufficient amount of time to make your presentation, show all the material, what have you, for the drug. Not your pitch, you didn't make it, just this is the way they want it presented. And they, oh, no. We're going to give this nigger 15 minutes. That right there is all I need to know. This is white supremacy racism in action right here. We are setting you, and they do this all the time in the context of the job to set you up to fail. And then, in my view, this is a situation that is designed to have you frustrated and disgusted. That's what we want, to be up here and make, our little snide remarks as she's going along and hurry up, faster. Oh, this nigga, what? She doesn't even know what she's doing. Oh, what a disgrace. And they live for that sort of thing. I feel like we saw that with President Obama. Live for these sort of moments, to just humiliate and make us look bad. And, oh, they don't know what they're doing. I can't believe they got this job. You were saying you felt like you didn't get to keep your poker face. I would say, don't feel bad. They were practicing racism, white supremacy. This is what we all experienced to various degrees throughout our time on the plantation. Knowing what you know now, is there anything that you would have done differently, right, like from the very beginning or throughout? Is there anything that you would have done?
Nothing.
Nothing.
There was nothing I could have done differently. And I did leave out, there was one black physician that was there, and the entire time, this was one, with only 2 black people in the room. And she had a smile plastered on her face the whole time. But it was like, this is just how I smile all the time. It wasn't a sincere smile. It was almost like I've had a lobotomy and this is how I look now, smile. Like, that's all she did. In terms of doing anything differently, I really couldn't. I sent the slides in advance. I sent the confirmation letter to the site to tell them what the meeting agenda was, how long I needed to present, what portions I was presenting, what we need to go over. I had provided them with all that information 15 days in advance of this meeting. So it wasn't as if they didn't know or I sent it to them the day before. That was not the case. So they had ample time and opportunity to give me enough time. It was just beyond the pale of reason to me.
White supremacy, racism. That's what I've come to the conclusion. Anytime that you begin running into things where there's no logical explanation for why these things are happening and it seems to be incorrect, or you're being mistreated, or it's causing you problems, and there's a total absence of logic as to why this is happening, that is white supremacy, racism. That's just my code and how I operate, and it has served me well. And generally, it's right. That's what it is, particularly when you cannot find logic to give you a better explanation for what's happening. If anyone can think of suggestions for how you respond in that situation, and I guess remaining codified in what I mean specifically about the nonverbals, because that was discussed last week. That's what our caller just brought up in terms of nonverbals, so that you are not visibly frustrated, so that you can kind of maintain your composure. I was thinking maybe even reminding the folks, if they're voicing their frustration and they're making these snide remarks, that, I've been given a shortened amount of time. The normal presentation is, however long it is, this many hours or whatever it is. I've been given 15 minutes. So.
Oh, no. The snide remarks were about the actual protocol.
Oh, okay.
That I had nothing to do. I didn't write it. I didn't come up with it. I had no input in it. They didn't like certain aspects of how it was written. Keep in mind, this is a research study, so it's not standard of care. So they wanted to argue with me over what standard of care was versus what the study was asking for, which was, even with just explaining it to a lay person, that's absolutely ridiculous. Because, again, it's research, not standard of care. We're trying to find something out. So things are going to not be how they normally are.
I see. I suspect that these individuals are aware of that difference.
Very aware.
Yeah.
Very aware of that difference, which was why it was like, how are you going to argue with me about, pre-medications, the pre-medications that the study is asking for? It was just different aspects of the protocol, but it was like, I have nothing to do with this. This is not a standard of care protocol. This is a research protocol. So things are going to be done differently, and that's the only explanation that I can give. And I actually stated that at one point, and one of the physicians said, well, that's not good enough. What do you want me to do?
Just berate a black. That's what it sounds like to me. Like we just want our 15 minutes to berate a black person, and yeah, we'll be satisfied if you can just give us 15 minutes to humiliate and degrade you. Then we'll be on our way. We can all get on about our day and feel better. And
And I feel as though my birth name is not ethnic at all. So I generally get a different reception when I show up versus when I send emails. So that's another thing. I felt played into it. They weren't expecting a black girl.
Very interesting. Probably true. I think we've had some other folks who have related to that. Either they have a name that would not necessarily code them as being a non-white person, and or a voice that does not necessarily code them as being a non-white person. I think we've had a few folks who have noted that difference in a workplace context in terms of how they're treated. Context of white supremacy. We have folks. We have folks who have any suggestions for what we've heard from our previous callers, or if you have your own situation that you would like to address. If we've not, we can get our caller in Florida. Thank you for yielding the floor. You should be with us, sir.
Oh, yes, sir. Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. Greetings to Gus, the host, the listeners, and callers. I did have a suggestion in response to that initial situation where if you are asked to, I guess, give an opinion or a critique of a fellow, I guess, coworker or whatnot, like I'm thinking I would say, I'm thinking like I would start out with, how is this supposed to help me? Or I'm too busy with my work right now to even focus on someone else. Like, can you help me with this? Or is there a new plan for me to review on what things I need to get done, to see if that would redirect them on like your situation at work or how you can improve. Like, I'm just too busy and I'm really focused on my tasks and responsibility. I wonder how they will respond to that. Like, how is this supposed to be of help to me? Because I have no way of answering that question because I'm just too focused on what I'm doing. Like, that's how I would reply to that if somebody had asked me. But like, I had some reports that I wanted to share. There was a guy, a black male, that came in to get his records, and he had a couple of battery charges, unfortunately. And he came up to the new black female that has been there for 4 months now. Congratulations to her. And she was making a commentary on the black male's attractiveness, external attractiveness. And she just said, yeah, but I don't know if I would, speak to him or something like that, because, he got all these charges. So the white coworker, she makes a comment and says, oh, well, he's just another Chris Brown. Okay. And there was no response from that. But I jotted that down, like I recorded that. And my next incident is, like, I sent the email on my checklist to get my my next promotion, and the suspected racist that had pretty much humiliated me and was condescending a couple of months ago. He's been out for at least the last month and a half, and he just came back from getting hip surgery. So he's been limping around on the cane or whatever. And he, like, okay, so the context is, I sent the email and I forwarded the email of what my supervisor sent me from a couple of months ago, and she was asking me, is this the correct list of things that you are required to do on a daily basis? And then I said, yes. I said, yes, ma'am, this is correct. So her response to it was that, I sent this checklist, I guess saying that it was finalized to the person, this guy, the white guy, and he wasn't going on surgical leave or whatever to get surgery. So this was months ago. So she said she would have to get back to me, being that my job is unique, okay? And this person, maybe a couple of days later, he comes, he walks by my desk, and the new black female is just totally oblivious, but victim of racism, of course. And he is trying to pretty much deceive her and trying to be benevolent, kind, and whatnot. And, speaking with her, saying that he just got out of a meeting, and we're just trying to make sure that everyone's getting paid appropriately. And it was about court administration. Like that, indirectly, that was language to, I think, pretty much get a reaction out of me, or a desired reaction out of me that he wanted, but pretty much get. So he has this shirt in his hand with the company symbol on it. So he offers me the shirt, okay, as some kind of act of kindness. Now this is done after I sent that email. All right, so like I told you, they've been trying to give black people compensation and titles over the last couple of months. So that was extremely, as you would say, Gus, tacky, in poor taste, ultimately an act of racism, trying to get me to, for some reason, be controlled by him. There was another incident as well where there was the circuit rider that came out. Okay, there was a page in there because they've been putting a lot of black people's faces in there. Like, I have my picture in there. A new black female was in there, and she was just totally unaware of what she was in there for. She was like, nobody told me that I got a compliment from a customer. And our supervisor was speaking to us, and she said, well, I didn't know either. And so I said, so you didn't know either, huh? So I'm like, how did that get into the newsletter? So she was just pretty much just quiet, didn't really give any kind of answer. She did respond, but it wasn't nothing significant. But the point about this recent circuit rider was that the older clerk, he's retired, and they have like pictures from him and his wife on vacation in Washington, D.C., and they're taking pictures at different monuments, and one of the monuments is the Martin Luther King statue. Okay, like that that was put there strategically. You got a bunch of black people's pictures in this circuit rider, and you got the former clerk and his wife taking a picture in front of the Dr. King monument. That was put there for a reason, in my opinion, and nobody really mentioned this. But as far as that goes, that is all that I have this week, and thanks for allowing me to share.
Context of White Supremacy. Courthouse, learn all you can. That Chris Brown comment, I was pondering, that was almost one where I would almost have to genuinely ask, what do you mean another Chris Brown? Like, break it down for me, because I really would like, give me a little bit more detail. Like, I know, he's been accused of whatever, but yeah, like I might have asked just to follow up. But I'm glad you broke out the pad, write it down. Excellent. The newsletter tag, we had talked about that, them weaponizing the newsletter and putting all the niggers pictures in the newsletter for whatever reason to make it seem like that they are just and they don't do anything incorrect. The background noise, yikes. Sorry about that. Well, that wasn't me. Hopefully, folks will remember to use their mute button if things are rowdy on your end. But yeah, we had talked about them weaponizing the newsletter before, and then not having information about how things happen on the job. Like I don't know how that took place. I'm standard operating procedure with racist man, racist woman, denial, and no snitching on other whites in the workplace. I'm not surprised either about I guess, the way that they were handling, I guess, going through your checklist of duties on the job and saying that, we're trying to make sure that everyone is being paid correctly. Like, that sounds ominous anytime I hear language like that being used in a workplace around my work description or what have you. It sounds like whites probably conspiring, like we might be overpaying this nigger. Let's, see if we can take a few of those nickels away or add something. We're giving him too much money. We need to add some things to his workplace duties and responsibilities to justify giving him all of this cornbread. That generally is the way I process it, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes. How did you process those words?
Okay, you mean like when he made that comment about that meeting?
When he said, what was it? We're trying to figure out your duties to make sure that people are being paid correctly, or how did he phrase it?
Like he was responding to the black female because she was telling him, like, maybe you should go home. You're limping around a lot and it looks like you're in a lot of pain, so maybe you should take the rest of the day off. And he responded by saying, well, I just got out of a meeting with court administration. I think they work for the state. They work upstairs. So they had like a little meeting. And he was adding in that, well, I'm just trying to make sure that everyone's being paid correctly or something of that sort. And he kind of looked over at me and looked back at me. Okay. Like meticulous details, okay? And I just think that he was trying to get a response out of me that would mischaracterize me, I guess.
We talked about the importance of the non-response, non-verbals, even very important, even because I think a lot of times they are trying to get a response out of us, even a non-verbal response out of us. I mean, they are. All of us, I think the caller in Wisconsin was saying it before they were looking at her screen, all of us should be functioning as though we're under surveillance, like even our facial expressions and how we respond to things that they're saying. I think they do those. I think she had said even before she got to the monitor situation, the caller in Wisconsin, she was saying that she thought they were, I guess, running some sort of loyalty test on her to see if she would do what they would do, buy a lottery ticket or whatever else. But I suspect that, yeah, they do those types of things all the time to see how we're responding, what our facial response is going to be in the workplace. All of us stay codified in not moving too much, just listen. Back to work. Context of white supremacy. If we have other folks, if we've not heard from you at all, if you have commentary that you would like to share, either your own situation or things that other folks have chimed in with, feel free. Any folks that we missed completely?
Hey, can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Hey, how you doing? How you doing, Gus? This is Victim out of New Jersey. I like workplace racism because now that I'm learning more about how racism works, it's just amazing over the years how many things I just let kind of slip by. At work, I know you don't suggest going to company parties, but I did attend. Nothing over the top happened. There was alcohol involved. I stayed for a short while and left. So survived the company retirement party for a coworker. Um, a particular salesperson that I work with. He's overly friendly. He always expressed, how much I'm a good guy. He likes me. I want to say that he has European with a little bit of Hispanic heritage, but classified as white. He goes out his way to always let me know in conversation this particular white person is racist, or this particular white person is racist, or family members in his family are racist. I stay mute and I listen. I would suspect he's practicing racism. I just really don't understand what's the need to express to me that the owner of the company is racism. He has a racist grandfather. I guess he's trying to let me know that he's not racist. So that's a mental note. So if anybody out there could let me know how would they handle that conversation, if that conversation persists. I'm a truck driver, so I have a Hispanic partner, the descendants of parents, lineage from Puerto Rico. So reluctantly, when I'm on the phone, me and my cousin and other friends, we discuss racism and the system of racism, white supremacy frequently. As we're talking about it, I always see him, chuckle or roll his eyes, or as if, you guys focus on racism too much. I'm in the New York City area, so there was an incident of a racist white lawyer who went on a tirade about Hispanics speaking Spanish and how they need to be deported and how his tax money goes towards their welfare. So today he's speaking and, he's expressing how racist it was and how over the top it was and his concerns. And I just thought to myself, as I'm on the phone and he's minding my business, as me and my cousin discuss our travels through this system of racism, white supremacy, he thinks we're exaggerating. So I just listened and I just thought in my head, I said, listen, there's no escaping racism, white supremacy. And being though that I work in New York City and I drive trucks and I deliver to restaurants, I'm always in the presence of Hispanic workers. There's a lot of colorism within that community. I'm referred to as Moreno. I don't know whether I should take that as disrespectful, but I go out my way to let them know my name. You don't have to refer to me as a color in the Spanish language. And it's kind of funny that a lot of the Hispanics who refer to me as Moreno, I'm more of a light brown skinned guy. So a lot of these Hispanics that I encounter or my complexion are darker. So, so the confusion amongst Black Americans and also the Hispanic community, that just comes to mind when they refer to me as Moreno. As of right now, so I won't ramble. That's all I have of now.
And I'm going to see if I can do this one first, because you said you wanted suggestions on how to respond. This white guy that's coming up and saying, oh, yeah, these folks are racist, or this person is racist, or that person is racist, kind of ratting out these other whites as racist, and even other individuals. I thought he even had said some of his family members, perhaps. How would you respond to this person? That was the one you wanted feedback on, right?
Yes.
Okay. Just my view, those are some of the most dangerous whites. I think our caller in Florida, isn't that racial focal pointing? Isn't that the term? When they try and make it seem like it's just a small collection. Not all whites are racist, and certainly not I, but this small collection of whites in the corner, these are the racists. Isn't that the term, racial focal pointing?
Yes, sir.
Right in action. Right in action. In my view, those are some of the most dangerous race soldiers because they can be really, really effective at getting you to think that after they've listed like 20 or 50 whites that are racist, like, wow, he or she definitely is not racist. This is the greatest white person since Tim Wise or, John Brown. So I would say be especially careful with this individual, like race soldier number one, in my view. But any suggestions on how you is he asking a question? I guess just to be specific, is he asking you a specific question that he wants you to answer, or is it just how would you deal with him in general?
No, you know what? These like the first time he brought up his family, and it wasn't in context of anything. Just I back my truck in. I'm in the warehouse. He comes in the warehouse. He's rambling. And just, man, you know what, man? Yeah, my grandfather, man, he's racist. And just out the blue. Recently, the owner of the company, that guy, racist owner, oh, man, he's racist. The retirement party, I'm in the warehouse and, I'm like, hey, I didn't see you at the retirement party. Oh, yeah, he goes on about how he can't stand particular white female who's retiring and how she's racist. So this is the context in which he deviates into this person is racist, but I'm assuming not I speaking in a third person.
Indeed. Okay. Well, I guess one suggestion that I have, if you have a white person who works there who is identifying other whites who work there as racist, I would write down date, time, exact specifics, because that could be invaluable. A year later, 2 years later, if something happens with one of these people that he has identified as racist, oh man, to be able to bust that out, like, well, on May 16th, 2018, Tom identified Fred as a racist and said that he had made a whole lot of racist statements. So I thought that was real important. I made sure to document it because he seemed real sure. And now we've had this other incident comes up that seems to corroborate what was said. Like, I would document any white people, maybe any period, but certainly any whites that work there. If he identifies them as racist, I would be sure to write that down and everything that he says about why he is identifying them as racist. Any callers with suggestions on how you would?
Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Good evening. Well, being that the gentleman that just spoke, I would assume is less confused. He's not the. What was that word y'all just used us or that phrase?
Racial focal pointing.
Yeah, so you're not going to fall for it. You know what's up. So if the white person is pointing out other white people as racist, I'm gonna make that my best friend. Yeah, what? Who else? Questions. Oh, that's all I would talk about with that white person. And like Gus said, I would write it down. Any time I get any altercation, I mean, this is like you're giving a gift from the gods. Like anytime you get any altercation with anyone, this white person, if a white person says another white person is racist, listen to them because they don't do that. That's against their code. So they're letting you know, yeah, this person's racist. Write it down. Yes, beautiful. The Marina, whatever that means, brown. If you're black, they'll call you a negra, whatever. With people, you said Hispanic. Where are they from? It's different ways, different types of people.
Mainly in the New York City area.
Okay, all right. So that's easy.
Yeah, Mexican.
Don't call me. Yeah, don't call me that ish. I don't understand that. Go somewhere with that. They know. They understand that. They're gonna stop if you do that. Because if you if you allow that to go on, right, they're going to start calling you hijo de puta. They're going to call you a lot of stuff that you might not pick up on. You know what I'm saying? So you check that right away. Don't let that go down at all. Because I was even at the hospital one day and just, he looked like a Mexican dude, called me a cabron. I went off. You don't call me that, you know what I'm saying? And he got the point. So I wouldn't allow that to happen, especially from black people who are confused and call themselves, Spanish, because they speak Spanish, whatever. But definitely that white person, man, you giving a gift from the gods, bro. I would follow him around. I would stick to everything he says. I would follow what he says like it's the law of God itself. You said this person's racist. As soon as you get away, write it down, time, date, like Gus said. And anytime you get in an altercation with any of them white people, go to HR, you pull that up, he getting in trouble or they get in trouble. You not. I mean, my mom.
Can I be heard?
Yes. Is this our caller in Wisconsin?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Okay. I have had experience in what you said, Gus, race soldier. That is the apt term for that. Typically, that person is trying to get you to lower your guard so they can do a great deal of damage to you, get some personal information, and try to use it against you. Like you said, Gus, that is a very dangerous person. There's a person like that at my job right now. Every time he says something like that to me, so-and-so is racist. He's even bought books. He bought, Evicted. He said, this has been this was on President Obama's reading list, and he bought it. He said, I'll let you read it. And I was like, I have 3 books I'm reading right now. I don't know when I would get to it. I would just immediately change the topic to work. So if you're pulling in and he comes up to you and he's like, so-and-so is a racist, immediately I would just change it to whatever you need to do with whatever you have. Like, are we going to unload this truck? Where do I need to sign, or where do you need to sign, or what have you, right, and just get off the subject, because that's how they lower your guard, and they'll do that quite frequently. Those are the most dangerous people on the job, and you can immediately you can push them away, and they'll come around and they'll try to get some more information. Just always be watching those people. Make sure you're not giving them any personal information. Make sure you're keeping your answers vague or about work. Always steer it back to work. I'll mute my line. Thanks.
Gus, if I can add in too, you guys are 100% right, because this same salesperson again comes to me volunteering information and expressed to me how another victim was handling customers on his route, and how he was making sexual advances that was unwarranted at a particular customer. The particular gentleman of color from Jamaica, I just kind of listened. I noticed gentleman's character, and I know that he wasn't. I wasn't there, but I can vouch for his character, and I'm pretty sure that he wasn't making sexual advances at any particular customer. So he tried to, get a response out of me. I just stayed there, stone-faced. I listened, and I said, "Oh, okay, interesting," and I walked off. I'm not pretty sure how codified this particular black gentleman on my job is, so I really didn't even bring it to his attention. I just kind of mind my business because I knew it wasn't an issue. But you guys are right, and I do watch this particular gentleman on this particular racist suspect on my job very carefully.
Context of White Supremacy. Any folks that we missed completely? Anybody that has a hand up that we've not heard from at all? If you have commentary, line should be open. Proceed.
Might be heard.
Let's see. Ooh. Let's get the person. Oh, I can't see the numbers. They're making me work really hard. Let's get the person last four digits 2215. Was that you? 2215?
Yep, yep. Hello, everybody. Real quick, I wanted to just mention this wasn't really necessarily direct racism in the workplace towards me, but I work in the engineering technology field, and I just wanted to comment of, I think I heard Thomas say, I believe it was last week or so, when he mentioned about the software recognition, facial recognition software. So he mentioned something about how, that type of software or program is generally programmed by someone who generally has those biases, right? And so there's this particular software that we have and a technology that we use in the technology field, and our products that we've created and the software that's used for communications. These devices will talk from one device to another, and one of the things that's used in the protocol is a master communication port that would talk down to another device that has a slave port. And so there's this terminology that's just being used for, at least a good 40, 50 years now with the software, the use of the terminology of master and slave communications. And it didn't really dawn on me much. For the years that I've been involved with the company, whenever we had to come, it just kind of made me feel a little uncomfortable whenever we hear it, and whenever you hear of white people using that terminology, it just kind of felt weird, And again, this has gone on for at least a year. If you trace back the history of the software, again, you're going back at least a good 40, 50 years. So again, to Thompson's point, when someone sat down and thought this through, they had this mentality of, master slave, one greater or one less than type of reasoning. Another software that we have, it really made me think. It didn't really dawn on me until after I've been listening to your show for about a year now, and I came back around to this software where there's certain security configuration that you would use in the software, and you literally can create people and add them privileges to a user or group. And when I was trying to explain it, I just couldn't help but to think, well, this really happens in the real world, where somebody sits back and determines what group people go in, and literally decide what privileges that this group can have, and what privileges are taken away from this group, another group. So you literally can create your own group. You can put the people in the groups that you want, and you can literally take away privileges from one group versus the other. And again, it wasn't necessarily a racist thing that happened towards me, but when I'm sitting back and I'm looking at this, I'm saying, wow, somebody literally had to sit through and think this through. And for the years that this has been around, this is the mentality that people had. I can put people in groups, I can assign them privileges, and I can take away privileges from other groups. And the more I think about it in the software, it's like that's what's happening. That's what happens in the real world with white supremacy and racism. Somebody sitting back thinking about what people are going to go into what groups, and what privileges they can have and what privileges they can't have, and what tokens are given and what tokens are taken away. And again, the terminology and just the way that it's being used in the software just really makes you think. That's all. I just wanted to share that. That was it.
Much obliged. Much obliged. I'd heard that the technology of how slave is used in the tech industry, and absolutely racist white supremacists. The language, words are very important, and frequently their use of words tells you exactly what their mentality is as it relates to non-white people system of white supremacy, and what is their ultimate driving motivation. Some of the other folks who spoke up simultaneously that we missed completely, did you have commentary?
Hey, Gus, can I speak to that guy offline if you can facilitate that, please?
Sure thing. The caller, if you drop me an email untiljustice@gmail.com, I can forward to Thomas in New York.
Sure thing. Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Good evening, guys. 2812 from Virginia. Hope everybody's having a good call. Having a hopefully decent work week. So, I don't want to say good timing. That wouldn't be accurate. But I had two incidents. And one incident was I have a gentleman that I work with. I'm just to give somebody background I'm in sales. I don't have a salary. And so I'm just commissioned. And I go to an office a couple of days a week. And I work there, but I'm not assigned to that office. Like, I don't have to be there. I have other locations, and I'm in sales. I'm in banking. And so I have this suspected racist guy that I'm actually doing business with now, coincidentally. And every day that I come into the office recently, he will say, oh, hello? Oh, background noise. He will say, oh, look who's in the office today. Very loud, and it's very tacky. Almost insinuating like I'm number one, like I have to be there every day, which is the misconception he has, but he's been doing it more frequently. He's like, oh, we got the privilege of, he's going to be here for a couple of days. Great to see you. Oh, look who's here to do some work. And then I looked at him the other day, and I just said, hey, man, come on. And he looked at me like, oh, you're actually, like, this is serious to you. And I didn't say anything back to him, but it was just very, very strange because, you know, he's one of those white guys that's very, quote-unquote, laughy and jokey, but also one of these guys that does a lot of hunting and talks about killing Muslims. So that's all you need to know. So I thought I had a little self-respect in reference to just being a little bit more serious. Yesterday I had a conference call, and we were discussing some numbers, and my manager, sales manager, now I think the capacity I could put him in is he just monitors my numbers, because that's it. You know, I don't work for him or anything of that nature. He just kind of just monitors, you know, what we do as a sales force and as a unit. And yesterday we had a call, and he went out of his way to basically embarrass me. We were discussing a work situation that he literally could have discussed with me offline, and he decided to take it upon himself to do it on that conference call. And the other three people on the conference call who were suspected racist too, they didn't know he was going to do that. And after he got done, the whole call was quiet. And I think he knew what he did. I think he specifically knew what he was attempting to do, which was embarrass me in this situation. And it wasn't necessary. It was something that we could have discussed offline. But my question to everyone on the call is that, should I approach him about it and say that that was inappropriate what he did, or should I just continue with my plan of working towards a pathway to where he is no longer managing me or working with me in any capacity, which is what I'm working on, either moving to a different company or just totally getting out from under him. Because even though I might work for other suspected racists, there are some that are a little bit more tactful. They're all dangerous in their own way, but they might be a little bit more tactful. And I've worked for other people to where they don't handle circumstances in that way. And the reason why I was able to observe it is because I coach, and I coach basketball. And there's just certain ways that you even have to communicate with kids and adults. And, you know, there are certain things you talk to people, you don't have to talk to them about it publicly. And I'll go ahead and mute my line. Thanks, guys.
Indeed. For the question, I guess, that was asked, is this worth addressing this now as him being unprofessional in kind of publicly dealing with this issue and something that, you know, could have been addressed privately between the two of you? I think at least for me, it would depend on what the timetable is going to be in terms of how long for you to successfully execute your plan. If you think that this might take 6 months, 4 months, that's a long, at least in my view, that's long enough to have to be with him, that I would prefer to have that be as a 4 months with as little turbulence as possible. So if addressing this will minimize some of the tackiness over the next 4 months, then I would do it. If I think my plan, if I can execute my plan faster than 4 months, where this is something where it might not take but a month or so or 6 weeks or so, it might not be worth my time to even bring it up. Like, I can just put that time into getting my plan, and that might even motivate me to, get this done quicker. The timetable for how long I'm going to have to endure him would probably be a big motivating factor with regards to, whether I'm even willing to invest the time to address this issue. Did other folks, do you all have an opinion on whether or not you would address the caller, whether or not, not the caller, whether or not you would bring up this issue in terms of being professional? If there's something that needs to be discussed, let's do this privately in a professional manner. Would you all bring it up, or would you just, hey, I'm trying to get out of here anyway? Folks, solid.
Have you heard?
I would say keep a record.
Keep a record. Was that it, Thomas in New York?
Have you heard?
I heard you as well. I heard folks speak up, and then they only gave a partial, or I guess maybe that was it. Thomas in New York said keep a record.
No, I was just saying keep a record of it. Don't go say anything. Just keep a record of it, and if anything ever comes up, you pull up that record. In fact, email yourself every time it happens exactly what was said, the time, the date. It will be stamped on that email. And if you ever have a situation with this person and you have to go to higher authorities, you pull up those emails and you bring them in that meeting with you.
Okay. The other person that spoke up, did you have a thought on whether or not you would address this issue?
I agree with both yourself and Thomas in New York on those tactics. I think they both can be used. But also, I think regardless to whom or what, he should still speak up. Presumably later on when he's about to leave. I think that'll probably be best, because just practicing that and becoming more codified about speaking up for yourself it's not something that it comes normally for us, because we're so beaten down on a daily basis. So that just getting that off your chest and not allowing that energy to go to your family, that negative energy to go to your friends, put it where it belongs, right back to him. And I'll mute my line.
Great perspective. Practice codification at speaking up and addressing when we're mistreated, especially a job that you're going to leave. Always think it's great to practice codification. That's a great point. Other suggestions? Would you speak up and address the situation, or would you just, put the energy on your exit strategy? Maybe folks are still pondering. I'll check in as we continue to navigate.
Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, cut you off. But
Hello, can I be heard?
Yes, ma'am. Heard you as well.
Okay. I'm sorry. I was been trying to speak for like 10 minutes, and I didn't know if there was a problem with the line. I'll mute my phone again.
Okay. Well, the male caller that
speak.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I would just say I would try to give it some time and then probably say something. Then, as though it seemed like he has great concern in staying at this job. But other than that, me personally, I would probably say something immediately. But it seems like he really wanted to stay at this job, so I would give it some time. Maybe a few days, maybe a week or two, and then probably, like you said, you don't want to wait until too much time passed, and I'll probably approach it that way. But I definitely think on what I would want to say and how I would want to say it before I even try to make that step.
Okay. Another
May I be heard?
Yes, ma'am.
I wouldn't say anything. If your goal is to have him not be your supervisor anymore, I would put my energies there, primarily because he probably wants a reaction out of you. And if you give him the reaction of saying something to him, he'll have that satisfaction and he'll know that he got to you or he got under your skin because, like you said, you feel as though he knew what he was doing. It sounds like if it was something that could have been discussed offline, it sounds like it was a provocation. So I would not feed into it at all. I would actually wait to see if there was another provocation, probably in the next few weeks, and then you'll know for sure that he has an agenda.
Be a bit more strategic about things. I like that as well.
Appreciate it.
Indeed. Let's see. Anybody that we missed completely who's not been able to share?
Yes, myself.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm a first-time caller. I just to answer the previous question, I agree. I think with mostly everyone that he shouldn't say anything and just focus on pursuing the shift in direction. Gus, I sent in an email about my workplace situation. It's a follow-up from a few weeks ago. I was wondering if I'm willing to speak about it, but I wrote out details. I was wondering if you're willing to read it.
Let's see. That's this is an awkward one. Most of the time when I read emails, the person who wrote the email is not with us live as I'm reading it, but
okay.
I'm absolutely
well.
Okay.
I've been shy. I've been shy, and but you said it's a participatory call, and I planned on calling in and reporting on other things, so I just wanted to kind of just break myself in.
No.
But I would still like to remain anonymous for now.
Not a problem. Okay, so is this your update? The one came in since the show went live? This is your update?
Correct.
Okay. I will read the update, and then do you want to add?
Yes, I can add some more details and some other things that I remembered as I was thinking and writing that I didn't add.
Okay. So she's given us the background. I'm employed at a very progressive, non-profit financial organization. The overall mission is to help non-white people. Now, see, it says POCs, people of color, women, low-income families, etc. See, I would read that as non-white people, white women, low-income families, etc. Anyway, obtain the financial services and products that may not be able to get anywhere else. This organization acknowledges the existence of racism, white supremacy, and has several staff groups for the various racial classifications, in addition to a new racial equity initiative that's been launched intending to address inequalities within the organization. For example, there is a white group, a black group, and now a new POC group in addition to the equity initiative. As you can see, we do a lot of talking and appearing to address the problem. It is also worth noting that the founder regularly receives death threats and has been physically attacked by white supremacist groups as retaliation for related legislative government policy work. He also confirmed that the members of one Klan group that vowed to destroy him includes 2 former CIA directors. I was quite shocked to hear this candid admittance of racist government. Looking back, I see key mistakes initially of starting this position. The biggest one being too open about my life and inviting coworkers to a birthday party at my home. Yikes. My manager and director did not attend, but a team member and other white staff did. Scenario number 2, the manager and director. I'm a video producer and was hired directly by my company as an employee on a termed contract, 1 to 2 years, to assist with creating a series of short films, scheduling, organizing media, creating documentaries. I worked directly with a manager, white female in her 40s, who is responsible for the project I was specifically hired for, but my official supervisor is my director, who is in charge of our entire team. When I first started, they talked about how happy they were to have me and even mentioned how overqualified all of the applications were, including myself. They were eager for me to help get things organized. We were working on several short documentaries with lots of media files. A couple of months after I started, my manager initiated 2 conversations with me about taking on a bigger role in the project. She said she and the director, white female, 50s, suspected anti-sexual, had talks about me producing one of the short films and another discussion about me taking over managing things as the work was taking up more of the manager's time than expected. There was a knowledge gap, so they initially hired a consultant before I started. The white female 40s suspected anti-sexual to advise on the production process, and all team members have helped produce a video on top of their normal job responsibilities. Late last year, the videographer, white male in his 40s, had a serious stroke and is unclear when or if he will return. My director says approximately 1 year. However, he has to relearn how to read and write again in addition to the media software we use. He has a graphic design background but was doing an okay job shooting. I spoke to him recently and the conversation was mostly incoherent. He said he is like a child and he doesn't know how much he will be able to relearn. He just sits around all day until he goes to therapy. Since his illness, I have taken on more of his work, including a nightmare task of sorting through and organizing thousands of vaguely named video files he was managing in order to finish the projects he was working on before the stroke. I have also been asked to reshoot events and internal trainings, tasks he also performed. In December, my manager and I met with other staff members to discuss finishing up edits on a video not related to the project my coworker shot. Before the meeting, she came into my office to inform me that my director didn't want to spend too much time on the remaining edits and not to agree to anything too time-consuming. When we went around the table for intros, I said, "Hi, I'm going to be editing your video." I did project excitement and was genuinely happy to be working on something different. I now see that was the issue. After the meeting, she came into my office, closed the door, and said she felt undermined by my introduction. She then repeated what I said, projecting a similar tone with a focus on the "I'm going to be editing your video" part. I initially said I'm sorry, which I now regret, then clarified that wasn't my intention. She responded she just wanted to get that off her chest, mentioned something else, then left. She's clearly burned by my competence and insecure about something. Another time I conferred with her on the title for a blog post I was writing, and she was leaving. She said, "I guess I'm pretty smart, huh?" I gave an affirmative response like, "Yeah, sure," or something like that. I now wish I hadn't. When I first started, I suspected she was on some kind of medication because her hands and face twitched slightly. I keep saying that opioid thing for a reason. I walked into her office once when she was taking pills and she mentioned she was having a bad reaction to some drugs, opioids. So far, I have done 3 internal videos for the organization in addition to the work I was hired for. Also, my PC has a device license only for software I need, and the director said she couldn't upgrade my account to give me access to our editing suite on multiple devices so I can work on my faster system and at home without buying a new version. This is Adobe CC. I contacted the account representative who confirmed all they had to do was upgrade my user account at a prorated price until the annual renewal in a few months. She lied. In February, I was due for my 6-month introductory review, which coincided with the normal annual review period for most employees. On February 2nd, my director announced on the weekly call that she would be scheduling meetings with everyone individually for the upcoming review process. A few days later, February 15th, when I was working on my coworkers' files, my manager comes into the office to ask me if I had finished and given the hard drive to the consultant who was going to finish editing one of the videos he was working on. Note, the consultant has since taken on a producer role. I picked up a lot of nervous energy and felt really uncomfortable because she has responded to an email earlier where I confirmed that the consultant would have everything later in the week. My manager then tried to make an issue about delivery of a blog post I was working on. The plan was to do a blog post later that week, but we discussed that the deadline was flexible and could be pushed back because the blog is her principal responsibility. However, my director instructed her to prioritize finishing our annual report. I've been helping her with other tasks, and I see that she was starting to treat me like a personal assistant and using me to cover skills gaps with some of our software. She later told me the director okayed temporarily changing the blog schedule from weekly to bi-weekly until the report was finished, so whenever she would pop in to ask me about it, I would say I'll have something tomorrow. The problem was organizing the files was more challenging than I anticipated, and I was focused primarily on sorting that out. She mentioned that she had her review that day, February 15th, and I wondered if that is what sparked her pushy intrusion into my office. She told me that she was anticipating the blog because I said I was working on it, but it's no big deal because of the schedule change, and advised me that sometimes it's best to underpromise and overdeliver. I told her I understood there was no hard deadline and that I'm contracted specifically for the video project and have to prioritize that. She backed off but ended the discussion by saying that she wanted us to trust each other. This was a big signal for me that she was now working to stab me in the back. The conversation was a waste of my time and irritating to say the least, considering I had not really missed any deadline. I'll stop here just because there's a lot more detail and you're with us, so you can kind of pick it up now that we have a considerable amount of background information on what's going on in the workplace. Do you want to pick it up from here?
Yes. Do you prefer me just to summarize or read the rest of it?
You can kind of give us a summary because I think this is background, and you said you had additional info that you wanted to add.
Oh no, this isn't background. This is kind of explanation. So it just goes into this is an explanation. I'm sorry if it's a little long-winded. I hope it's. But what's happened is that really the second part is the real issue with I haven't been able to. I had trouble. It took me 3 months to get my initial introductory review. And so I had to go to HR and ended up escalating and following up with the general counsel. But my director, when she initially said that she was going to be reviewing everyone, I sent her a email to just get clarification and confirm what the process would be like for me, because I didn't know if my status. There's a lot of confusion in the organization, and they're growing, and they don't have a lot of systems and process. So I wasn't sure if they just weren't confused about how I should be treated or not. But she was always very dismissive, and she Gus, it would just be really easy for me to read through it.
Okay, yes, ma'am. That's totally fine.
Okay. I'm sorry. I just kind of thought it out because in my mind, it's kind of everything's kind of linked, because I feel like my manager and director are kind of working together, and I think the priorities have shifted, and also they're circling their wagons to protect the coworker that got sick, and there's also just the base, simple racism. Like, why would they, lift me up or promote me over the consultant or pay me more instead of giving the work or the contract to the consultant that was hired. So, one second. So after she came into my office,
After the stabbing in the back part.
okay. Okay. Okay, so this was a big signal for me that she was now working to stab me in the back. The conversation was a waste of my time and irritating to say the least, considering I had not really missed any deadline. The next day, Friday, most folks left early, and on her way out, my director stopped by to thank me for working on the files and told me to leave early if I wanted to around 4 p.m. I stayed the full 8 hours because I'm paid hourly. The next week, my director caught me in the kitchen and asked again how things were going with the files. She thanked me again for working on such a difficult task. And when she thanked me again for working on such a difficult task. And when she went back to prepare her lunch, she coughed 2 to 3 times. I responded in kind, coughing even louder as I walked back to my office. At this time, my director still had not scheduled my review. On February 20th, I sent her an email to follow up and get clarification on the process for my term contract status. She did not respond, so I turned on my recorder and went to her office to inquire. She's one of these fast-talking types that always acts rushed and can be dismissive. She confirmed that I do get a review, but was unclear about another aspect of staff development called catalytic coaching that she said I do not get. A month later, my review had not been scheduled, so I went to HR and got clarification on the terms of my contract and learned that I am to be treated as a regular employee and receive the same review and coaching as other staff members. The HR rep said to give her until April 1st as a reasonable time to schedule my review. During March and April, my director mentioned nothing else about my review, and the conversations about me taking on more responsibilities on the project died out. As a side note, at the beginning of the year, the company also paid for my manager to take a documentary filmmaking class, about 2 to 3 weeks long. On April 17th, I sent my director a second email asking to get my review on her calendar. She did not respond. On the 19th, she stopped by my office on her way home for the day and said she got an email and we would do it, meaning the review tomorrow. The next day, she was in fact out of the office and sent no further communications about when I would have my review. I then made a formal complaint to HR. This was a Black female, older in her 60s, and explained that I was having a problem completing the review process, sharing the similar details I outlined with you all, in addition to documenting the policies and procedures that were being violated. HR thanked me for coming to them and said they will follow up with her to get my review completed. I also had a similar meeting with our general counsel, a white male in his 40s, and the word is that he's the person to get things done when you have issues. Adding to that conversation, the inconsistent statements that my director made about giving me access to the video software. We finally scheduled my review on May 7th, almost 3 months after my 6-month milestone. The review was mostly positive, but she did mention stumbles in communication and time management that had already been addressed. I also asked her about a pay increase as I am doing some of the former employees' work, and she said that doesn't normally happen. And she said the pay increase discussions or the salary review is separate, and that doesn't happen until about a year later. Now, to more recent events, last Friday, out of the blue, my director popped into my office to ask what I was working on. I didn't document verbatim what she said, but she made comments about being worried about me not having enough work. I told her I had plenty and was working on tasks I reported to during the weekly call on Monday. Her line of questions bothered me, so I turned on my recorder and went to her office to deliver the signed printed copy of the review because I had to add my own comments and then sign it and give her the hard copy. I was sure to note in the section for my comments that there were initial discussions about me taking on a bigger role, but those talks died out, and the current plan is to see how things go with the consultant producing the videos with me in the same support role. I asked her if she had a quick moment and told her that the asked her if she had a quick moment and told her that the manager had mentioned the opportunity and asked what happened to that idea, since she was concerned about my workload. And so I'm recording this conversation. She stumbled over her words, but managed to string something together about there not being enough time, I guess, if I produced a video and if I was also assisting or supporting another video project simultaneously. This week on Monday and Tuesday, she made similar comments asking about what I'm working on and said she was worried about me getting bored. I had to think for a minute about what might be motivating this, then recalled that another coworker on another team, this is a non-white Hispanic male from Puerto Rico, asked me about shooting a video coverage for internal managers retreat they were having. That was held on Wednesday. It slipped my mind, but I realized he never got back to me, so I sent him an email Wednesday morning to follow up, and he confirmed that the idea got shut down. Those are his words, stating he would push harder for me next time. I replied to ask who was against it and why, and I framed the question in a way to not, maybe alert him or make him think I was trying to start drama, but he has not responded. So I plan to pop in his office to see if I can get a recorded answer. When I met with the general counsel, he specified that the company has a strict non-retaliation policy and also provided examples of retaliation. And, he said I obviously can't be fired because I went to HR, and he specified like subtle forms of retaliation, like my director speaking to everyone or not speaking to me, in subtle ways you can be treated differently. So my question is just everyone's kind of thoughts and analysis on what happened. I'm wondering at this point, why did they even hire me, apart from just really being incompetent about how the process really works and what they need? Are they trying to fire me? Kind of what should I do? Just please provide general thoughts, critique on the code, things like that. I would say that someone told me that my manager, the one who I mentioned, I saw taking pills, it's funny, I didn't think about opioids, Gus. I initially thought about maybe some kind of depression or something, but someone did tell me that she was in a bad car accident. So that if she was, physically injured, she may have been given some kind of opioids. And then another thing that's happened is something that stuck out is the battery to the video is missing. The battery to our video camera is missing. The battery charger. So I suspect that someone may have snatched that, but I don't shoot too regularly, so it hasn't come up as an issue yet, but I'm suspicious of that. And it was interesting when I met with the HR rep, the Black female, I really felt like she was trying to feed me answers. Like she kept, when I explained what was happening and I was having a problem getting my review, she kept saying, so what do you think, what are the reasons why you think this might be happening? And she was saying, do you think they might be confused? Do you think, the director may just be confused because your contract is different? My contract's kind of unique. She said I'm maybe the third or fourth person in like the 7 years she's been there that's had that type of contract where you're an employee hired directly by them, not a temp agency, but it's a really long term. It's not like, short 3 months. That's it. Thank you, Gus. I appreciate everyone for listening. I'm a first-time caller, so I'm sorry if I'm not on code or I don't know all the formalities or the rules.
We are still learning, all of us. So, thank you for sharing. Wow, it's that's such a difficult situation. I don't know if that's the sort of environment that you want to be long term in terms of what in your mind what would be the best way for that situation to resolve itself. I think you did a great job with the recorder, with going to see the HR representative when the deadline had passed for your review. That's why I say emphasize on the broadcast on a regular basis policy and procedure, because a lot of times that'll be listed in your policy and procedure manual that, hey, you are supposed to get a review within a certain amount of time. And that way they can address if there are any concerns, any deficiencies in your performance that can get addressed. So you can have an opportunity to correct all of that. When you don't, and then they wait later, oh man, you're just not up to snuff, man. We can't get you that salary increase. They said that's supposed to take place a year later or whatever it is. Oh yeah, we got some concerns. Communication hasn't been that great, and got some concerns. Don't know if you're going to be able to get that raise or not because I didn't get my review in a timely manner to grow as an employee here at the company. They do that sort of, and that's why I say whites don't get benefit of the doubt when she says, okay, we'll do your review tomorrow, even though we're way late, already in violation of policy and procedure. But okay, we'll do your review tomorrow. Just wanted to chop in, say hey before I step out, and then not here tomorrow. She already knew. She had probably already set up her office voicemail. Oh, going to be out of the office tomorrow, going skiing, doing our thing tomorrow. I'll be back on after the weekend. She knew she wasn't coming back, and I just take the position that whites do that sort of thing all the time, deliberately lying to non-white people and disruptive lies so that, oh yeah, I can get prepared. I'm doing my review. They waited all late and everything. I finally get it and you come in and she's not even there. Like, wow, like just total tacky. It doesn't get any better than tacky in the workplace. I think continue doing a great job documenting and recording when they're missing deadlines and doing things that are in violation of their policy and really hampering your development as an employee there. Continue to document. I'd review if you want to stay there. I mean, if with these type of tacky people, and I just take the position, any of the whites that are talking about racism, like even trying to give the appearance that we're not racist and we're addressing the problem, like those are some of the worst race soldiers to be around for a variety of reasons, some of which you shared with us during the conversation this evening. I would just make an assessment about if you want to even be here for a long-term basis, and then based on that, you can figure out, in terms of what you want to do. It sounds like you're doing a great job applying your code, at least from what we heard. Other folks who listened, who heard some of the details, do you have any suggestions for how she's dealing with her situation?
And real quick, Gus, why do you think they hired me?
I think a lot of times, particularly in these type of outfits, right, where you said it's POCs and women and poor people, like it's great to have Negro window dressing. Love that. It's for whites, they do, and it sounded like from everybody that you named, I didn't hear any other non-white people. All the people that I named, it was white women this in her 40s, white women in her 50s, white man in his 40s. You don't want an organization that's supposed to be about ending racism and all you got is whites in the group. You got to have some Negroes that look like they're doing something other than fetching, in my opinion, that look like they're doing something and fetching coffee and, maybe doing some babysitting. And particularly if they brought you in and you noted, from what I read, you noted when you went and you were in charge and you said, I'm going to be in charge of your video editing. The white woman wigged out. She had to go and get her opioid fix, maybe. That right there. We want a Negro, but I don't know if we want a really competent Negro, especially if they're all disorganized and, whatever. I don't know if we want a really competent Negro that's going to come in here and do some excellent work and be in charge and make us look shabby. Like, wait a minute now, that's, not what we picked on at all. That could be part of it as well.
Yeah, but they said I was overqualified. They said everyone that applied was overqualified, including me. So, but I guess, I don't know, I guess they didn't, I guess it's not real because I'm black. Like I'm really not as competent as my resume states. Who knows? Because they're racist, white supremacists. Did listeners any feedback for our female caller here? Any suggestions or feedback for a situation?
May I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Sorry, first off, that she's dealing with this. I mean, we all deal with it, but it's still tough and difficult to hear. I do think one of the things that you question, and it's, again, I think that's really on code of yourself, is like, why did they hire me? And I think Gus touched on that very well. They do that quite often, dressing up. And in this age of diversity and quote unquote interracial dating and all these other Me Too movements and everything that's supposed to be positive or going in that direction, I think it's just smoke and mirrors, and hiring you is another aspect of it. But I do want to ask you this: is that how do you think they perceive you? Because from what the story that was given, from what was read, it seems as if they hired you thinking that they had a good little quote unquote little servant, so to speak, that would go about and follow everything they said and do everything they ask you to do and just play your little role. And it seems like they're now realizing that you're way more competent and you're a threat. And I think that that's why you're seeing such backlash, quote unquote. Like, you're getting that right now because you are seen as somebody that is threatening. You could actually be in a higher role, in a higher position for most of those white people that are usually incompetent in those higher roles and in those higher positions. But that's my question for you. Like, how do you think they perceive you? Because that has a lot to do with how you're going to be treated. I'll mute my line.
Thank you. Excellent insight. I agree with that. And that's kind of the conclusion I'm starting to come to. I think I mentioned that I've kind of started to realize that my manager, who, directly supervises the project, she was treating me like her personal assistant. Like, in the interview, I agreed to help her with some of her other tasks. She's a copywriter, so she's responsible for all the writing. So she, writes and oversees all of the scripts for these different documentaries, but her other work is still in the blog, any writing internal to the organization. But she can't use really any of the the Microsoft Suite software except for Word. She can't work with Office 365 online. She likes to print out everything. So she'll pop in to have me like edit, a photo. She, like, for the blog post, she wants me to, we had this process where she would write it, then she would email it to me, and I would paste the blog into the the back end web software, and then she would publish it. All this ridiculous stuff that I've since nipped in the bud. So she, I do think she was hoping that I would be more like a personal assistant and kind of cover for her, because, like, initially, like I said, a few months after I started, and I don't know why she did this, she came into my office and said that her and the director had conversations about me taking on a bigger role. And the second conversation, she said they talked about me taking over managing it, and she, expressed how she would be kind of disappointed, but it was taking up too much time from her other work. So she was struggling to manage and juggle all the tasks related to this, because, again, they didn't really realize how time-consuming video is. They didn't have the capability in the department before. But like I said, all that shut down, and I think that she decided that she didn't want that to happen, probably because I'm Black, and so it was just offensive that a Black person was going to take over something she was doing. She wouldn't have been moved off the project because she still would be the reviewer of all the scripts. She would definitely have been involved, but I just would have done all the management stuff, which is technically what I'm doing, because they wanted me to help them get organized. So I created all these documents. And then it's just been dismissive, like the production documents and things I've made. I've had meetings with them and said, this is how I'm going to set things up. This is how we'll do a shoot schedule. This is how we'll schedule all the videos. And I showed, these were documents that I brought and samples that I brought when I did the interview. And now all of a sudden it's, oh, yeah, okay, all right. And then, they're just dismissive. Like recently, like last week, we had a meeting about a video that's in post-production, and they wanted me to put together a high-level schedule, so I did. And then when I sent it to them ahead of time, and then when we got to the meeting, my manager was like, I printed out my own, and she just did a different design, and she wrote notes on it and things like that. So they're just getting petty now and just defensive and rejecting, everything that I'm doing for them in support of the project.
Practicing racism.
My director did.
Practicing racism.
I think if you are not able to solidify yourself, and when I say that, I mean get yourself into a role where you're not isolated, but where you can work almost without any interruption or having to answer too frequently to anybody outside of your immediate circle. If you can't do that, I think you might want to segue and start to plan an exit, because I mean, I'll be honest with you, I've been in those positions where, I get brought in, and I've been brought in as that guy, and I'm in the tech field, and when it's realized that, wait a minute, this Negro can talk and he knows his work. Hey, Chris, Mike, we may need to reassess how we're going to treat this guy, and that could be. I mean, again, if you could find a way to work with it where you could move into some kind of department or any kind of place in the company where you're not touched and interacting with them as much, fine. But from what it sounds like, you have to, and that could be pretty tough to deal with. That being said, I'll mute my line.
Context of white supremacy. Hang on one second, because we're running down with time, and I told the caller who had the situation about the suspected race soldier enforcement officer who's in a tragic arrangement with a family member. So I want to make sure that we do get time for the suggestion. Did Stacy in the UK, who is still hanging in with us, 10 minutes to 4 a.m. London time, was that you, Stacy?
Yeah, I was going to comment on the last call, though. I didn't have anything specific that I was going to add.
Oh, well, who am I to deny? Proceed.
Yeah, because I'll join the discussion for the next program. But just listening into the tail end of that conversation, I would agree with what the male caller just said. It just sounds like a lot of what I've been through, to be honest with you. So if you can start to look for other roles, I know sometimes that's hard to hear and it's hard to accept, but sometimes we just have to be honest about the position we're in and the people that we work with. And just the point that I wanted to make about your question, and I'm sorry because I didn't hear all of the discussion, but I think you did ask a question about why they employed you. I don't know your complete rationale for asking that question, but it just sounds like perhaps you're starting to internalize some of the racism. And the thing is, they may well have loved you and thought you were going to be everything that she needed to be to cover up her inadequacies, or none of the above, and just as Gus said, wanted to do window shopping. But I think the important things in these situations is that we don't second guess ourselves, because that affects you in the long run. And when you start to internalize it, it's going to affect you in your day-to-day job and anywhere that you want to go for the future. So those are signs that we just need to look for when we're encountering these acts of terrorism. I'll mute my line, Gus.
Appreciate that, Stacy in the UK. Well said. Anybody that we missed completely that has a hand up? Anybody that we did not get to hear from at all? Oh, Ivy, did you have?
Hello.
Was that?
I'm sorry. I wanted to comment, but this is Red. I'm sorry. I'll wait until Ivy goes. I just wanted to comment about the female caller. I'll wait.
Friends, Ivy.
Yes, greetings, Gus. Greetings to all the callers on the line, and thanks, Red. I just wanted to quickly say to the question that was posed earlier about what to do when you're asked to critique another coworker, white or non-white. I was just going to be pretty quick with that. I would just say, I don't know, and that would be it. Any follow-ups that they have, it would be very similar to what someone else said in terms of what detail you'd go into about why you don't know. That, I'm focused on my own job, but I would just say, I don't know, And I'll mute my line. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Gus.
Appreciate that. Did we miss anybody? I have Red Nevada. Did anybody that we missed totally that had a hand up? Just making sure. Oh. Mr. Steele. Do you have commentary, Mr. Steele, or are you just listening? Might be just listening. Caller at 4457. 4457. Did you have commentary? Last four digits, 4457. Did you have commentary? You just listening? Assume they're just listening. Red in Nevada, proceed.
Thank you for allowing me to speak again. Just about the caller, Anonymous. Oh, and also, Gus, definitely appreciate your opioid references. Of course, that's one of my favorite subjects. But I definitely agree with the reasons that were already shared as far as why Anonymous was hired. And I also agree with, Stacey in the UK, not to maybe let it get to her so much. But then also, if that white man, also keep in mind, if that white man does ever, recover, I wouldn't be surprised if you're basically just filling in for him. If they'll find a reason, no matter how minute, no matter even if it's right now and he doesn't recover until a couple of years down the line, they may bring that up as a reason why to let you go, to make sure that he can get his job back. I've had previous jobs with a supervisor who actually died during, his tenure at that job, who didn't do his job well, but it did not matter. Just kept being shifted from different departments instead of just being fired. But I know that I've actually had the same problem that I discussed as far as with my supervisor, where she would schedule meetings. I maybe ever had one review when the other people on my team, and this actually just happened, had a review scheduled. She said, "Oh, well, the people, it was somebody else's fault." So, and that's the reason why we couldn't do the review. But I would definitely just document, and what I've been doing is documenting or even taking mental notes as far as myself, just correct my self-correction. If I was not fully meeting the standards of the department, then just at least taking note of my own correction, of how my self-development, of how I've gotten up to those standards, which just seems like you do document a lot, and maybe even using that to show how you are even more so a self-starter, because no one is actually, or she's not actually giving you the proper reviews, even though she eventually did, but just making up reasons as to why not to. And then also maybe even trying to research how to communicate with an opioid addict, because I'm sure these people know that she's on opioids, and they're just kind of not saying anything about it until maybe it gets too bad to where she, might be sleeping at her desk or nodding off or whatever. I'm sure that they know this. And then and then also maybe another reason why, white women, they're very conniving, and they like to use of course they consider us all their subordinates, use us as a tool to get back at one another. So, not really trying to throw these reasons out there to make you really feel like to make you really think about it too much, but just keeping in mind that these white people, they're just kind of protecting themselves, and these progressive, just like everyone else said, I don't trust that these progressive, quote unquote, progressive groups are really any more progressive than, a Nazi or anything like that. I'll mute my line. Thank you.
Indeed. Now, I did promise, I think we might be right on. I said the last 3 minutes we would do the suggestions, because this is off topic. The last 3 minutes, if there were any suggestions for the caller who has a suspected racist enforcement officer who is marrying a family member, tragic arrangement, and he was asking for suggestions on how to deal with that situation. Any suggestions that folks would offer on how to?
Have you heard?
Thomas in New York.
Yes. First thing I want to say is all white people get high. That's their culture. You think black people get high? We don't have anything on them, and I wouldn't worry about that. I mean, I would just stay away from them as far as possible. I mean, that's a choice. You know it's a inappropriate choice, so you know to stay away from that. But there's nothing you're gonna say that's gonna change that choice.
Any other suggestions? Appreciate that, Thomas in New York.
Hi, Gus. Hi, Gus.
Stacy in the UK, 3:58 a.m. London time, Friday morning.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't know why, but I imagine that this conversation was going to come up on workplace racism. It's quite bizarre. I mean, I have similar, family members who are in similar arrangements. I just think, as Thomas in New York said, you have to stay out of it. But I would also maintain my relationship with my family member. The situation may well work out well and they may be together for years to come, or things may unfortunately get worse. You don't want to have your family member isolated and in a position where they can't reach out to their family members when they need them. So I just wouldn't let any suspected racist get in the way of my relationship with my family. I'll mute my line.
Can I add something, Gus?
Yes, Ivy.
I had a suggestion that maybe you could tell your family member who's married to the race soldier to ask him questions that will help her to understand how white people work. Like, what do white people say when no black people are around? What are some ways that white people practice racism? Just any questions that, as Mr. Fuller would say and as Gus would say, reveals truth. You can learn from just this program. You probably know just from listening to this program, just different questions that you can ask. And I think some great questions were asked from a guest named Shannon somebody. Maybe Gus knows who she is. It was a really great program. A lot of great questions Gus asked her. So if you go back and listen to that, you could probably come up with some ideas of questions to pass along to her if you don't want to ask him directly. And that's all I had on my line. Thanks, Gus.
Indeed. Mr. Fuller has questions in the code book as well, questions specifically for white people. We take one more? Anybody else have suggestions? No other suggestions? It's everyone's favorite topic. I thought there would be more. Any other suggestions? Everybody satisfied? Right on. My suggestion.
Hey, one more thing.
Oh, okay.
Even if the cop was black, I would stay away. Because in my opinion, my codification, all cops are white. I know Gus doesn't agree, but so I see otherwise.